live.
Alrighty, let me take a moment here just to let them know that we're rating out. So, hey everybody, we're going to be rating out to Rex 73, and that's where she has graciously decided to host me for a conversation that we're going to be having, um, and believe that's on COVID and like the mental health and other like personal health implications that came along with like 2 years of isolation. So and other topics along the way. So let me go ahead and rate out. Hopefully it works this time, so we can just go head over there. Alrighty, it's gonna let us raid, so we're gonna be rating
Woohoo.
out in 4 seconds.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Alrighty, it worked this time.
Woohoo. All right. Yeah, I guess you already kind of introduced the topic there. We're talking about mental health and especially in relation to the now fallout from COVID as like things seem to be semi going back to normal, I guess, like as people still kind of start to move into their normal lives again out of like the COVID life. And how a lot of people have been affected by things from COVID and the pandemic that weren't necessarily like COVID related.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've been wondering about quite a bit. It's I've lived for like the past 2 years with, I'd say, very limited interpersonal communication. I used to work with people all the time,
Mm,
and it's been a bit of an adjusting phase.
yeah,
And I've been wondering, like what have people been experiencing and going through in those 2 years of just everything being so weird and different.
for sure. Um, yeah, I know. I definitely felt like that because I'm obviously not working, but I was going to school the whole time and like having to do classes from home and not being able to interact with like classmates or your prof in a way that like and I didn't think I interacted much in class in general until we went to online, and then I realized, like, oh shoot, you do a lot more interacting than you actually think you're doing. Especially in like our smaller group tutorials and stuff like during class, and it's like, dang, holy crap, this is like almost kind of sad how like little interaction I've had over the last couple of years. Um, yeah. Um, okay, to jump into this though, I think kind of the first thing I want to dive into is like maybe our own personal issues with mental health or like how this kind of affected us to like so for like you, I was wondering if like did you struggle with any like mental health stuff before the pandemic came along?
So the only thing that I've ever been consistently learning to live with is anxiety. I have
Mm.
that is something that I've inherited from both sides of my family. So it was just kind of going to occur. I do remember the first time that I had a panic attack. I thought I was literally dying
Mm-hmm.
because the way that they can affect you is sometimes they mimic symptoms of like a heart attack, or basically if you're kind of a hypochondriac or you worry, whatever it is that you're worrying about in that moment,
Yeah.
um, that can be amplified by the anxiety. So not knowing what it was, I was just freaking out and panicking. And the more that I'd freak out and panic, the more that it would get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been to the hospital like 2 or 3 times, and they're like, "It's just anxiety." I'm like, "What's anxiety?" And then they break it down, and then they give you your options, right? They're like, you can either learn to deal with it naturally,
Mm-hmm.
or there are medications that can help you. And I chose to take the path where I just kind of learn to deal with it. It's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
but it works best for me.
That's fair. I yeah, it's totally respectable. I mean, like people all have to choose to deal with their mental health in different ways, and sometimes I don't like the especially in the mental health communities and stuff. Some people will say like, oh, people are like, there's a lot of like not what's it called like prejudice, I guess, against people who like take drugs, and the people who take drugs who think about anyone else as like who just do it without drugs. It's like, oh, you're not actually like you don't actually have mental health issues because you can just like fix it by yourself. And it's like everyone's gonna deal with this in different ways, and no one's way is gonna be better than somebody else's. Yeah. So that was like kind of your big thing pre COVID, I guess. Have you feel like
Yeah.
COVID has exacerbated that, or do you feel like COVID has given you other issues like mentally, or like I don't want that sounds kind of weird, but like yeah, other mental health issues.
Well, I'd say that it's definitely been more mentally exhausting because basically the way that I had lived and operated my life for pretty much the entirety of it just stopped. Full stop. Just one day it was St. Patty's Day, streets were packed, it was busy, lots of people, and then the next day it was just like The Walking Dead, like everything's just desolation. I could drive in all four lanes of the highway without any fear of anything because there were no other vehicles on the road. It was so weird. And that was like I was like, well, there's the existential question of like, what do I do now? Right? And then there's all of the worries and panic that come along with that because there's like, well, got to pay bills. My main mode of income doesn't apply anymore, and those things definitely didn't help for someone that's already predisposed towards being anxious. But and to
Yeah, for
answer
sure.
the greater question, well, the core of the question is that I wasn't very harshly afflicted by it. There were, the standard human bouts of depression that occurred from isolation, but on the whole, I was able to handle myself pretty well. But I think that when you look at it on a case by case, like a person to person basis, we all handled it like we all had things that prepared us differently for it as well. It looks like you have a comment, and I'll let you
Yeah.
get into words too.
Yeah, no, Skrik Donkey, thank you for joining. The medications that help you are something I take regularly. Yeah, I think a lot of people do. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that helps a lot of people. For me, my mental health, I never have, but I also just never go to the doctor because I have a lot of issues with like medical history and stuff. So I've been like completely turned off from going to the doctors. Otherwise, I'd probably be on something. Yeah, I've experienced panic attacks that dwarf the voices experience. Dang. I've also, yeah, we've all, like, I also suffered with like pretty harsh panic attacks at points in my life. And I know how scary that can be. And I don't think I had the worst ones of like that were at all possible. I definitely had ones where like I like had trouble breathing and like I was like I would go into full panic mode, but I luckily got that under control. Like panic attack wise, I didn't have after like high school. I stopped having like really intensive panic attacks, and I actually moved towards having like the more disassociative like anxiety panic attacks, like where I would just like I will like disconnect from reality for like 10, 20 minutes at a time and not realize that I've like completely turned off, and like I slip into those type of panic attacks more now than anything. But again, even that's pretty rare after 2 years of the pandemic. But yeah, sorry, you were saying. So you feel like COVID, other than like yeah, some of the depression stuff, and maybe at the beginning like the anxiety of trying to get your life back on track, like once this all hit, was kind of more the bigger thing for you, right?
Yeah. For me, it was kind of a rare opportunity to become very introspective. Like for me, like personality wise, I'm pretty much like in the middle. I lean more extroverted. That I'm a very social and talkative individual, but I don't go out of my way to present myself in a crowd and to be like, hey, like to be a facilitator and a party goer. Like if people talk to me, I will not shirk away from a conversation. Um, and part of that was, I do like my downtime spending meditating, so to speak. I spent a lot of my time as a kid kind of looking inwards and asking big questions that I could never find answers to. So this was just kind of being able to take that approach from an adult outlook, but I also come from a position of luxury insofar as that it's just me. I
Yeah,
don't have any pets or family that I have to take care of. No
no
one on my
dependence.
payroll.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those stressors. that were present for everyone else did not exist for me. And I think that was what made it easier for me to kind of deal with things as they came along.
Yeah, no, that's I think that makes a huge difference. Like for me, like I when the pandemic hit, I had actually just quit, like not yeah, I just quit my job I think like 2 months before. So I was already out of work, so it wasn't like something that was like super stressful to me like, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job." Because I was already in a place where I was like out of work, I have money saved up, I live with my parents, so I'm like I'm in an okay position. But I did have friends who like as soon as that pandemic hit and their work closed down, they still had rent to pay. They didn't know at the time if like the stimulus checks were coming out. Like people had no idea what was going on, and it was like a like intense panic for those people like around me who did have that situation where they're like, I have no idea how I'm gonna handle this, right? I think that like super sucked seeing people I know go through that and like have to have that much stress of like, oh my God, am I actually gonna get kicked out of my house this month? Or am I not going to be able to pay my bills and now I'm going to have like debt following me for the next like however long this lasts? Because at the beginning we also had no idea like where this was going to go, what was going to happen, and even being in that place of like privilege like during the pandemic, especially the early months, it was like one of those things where I told my friends, I'm like, hey, if there's anything you need in the next like month or two, like because at that point we obviously didn't think this was gonna like it was like the two like I don't know what it was like where you were at, but like for us like our government basically said like, yeah, we're gonna shut down for 2 weeks, no worries, like everything's gonna be fine, we're just gonna like ride it out for 2 weeks. So we all thought it was gonna be like 2 weeks, a month at most kind of thing, and then we'd go back. So I kind of like reached out to a couple of my friends and was like, hey, we don't know what's happening this month. Like, I know you're freaking out about your job shutting down and stuff like that. So like, if you need anything, like, let me know. Like, I've got space. I've got like I can help you out with anything. If you need groceries, if you need food, like just. So I remember, yeah, that was super hard to watch. I can't imagine what it was like for people who went through that.
Yeah. And that was, it added on that whole economic layer to it, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
like still I had to figure out different ways to earn money um, than I had been used to prior, but it also gave me the opportunity to find work in other ways that I hadn't normally considered.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those routes, led me to streaming because I found myself with a lot of downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, while I'm figuring things out, I may as well at least spend time together with other people in some capacity, even if it's just like through sharing video games and working together with people and learning new challenges together. I was doing a lot of that already just privately, like investing a lot of time into it. So I figured, why not for everybody that's willing to be showcased with
For
their
sure.
consent,
Yeah.
be here.
Just like fostering some type of community to keep you social during this, I think was a smart decision. Part of me wishes
Yeah,
I would have started streaming back then. Obviously, at that point, I like wasn't into the whole streaming thing. I don't even think like at the beginning of the pandemic, I sincerely knew very much about Twitch. I think I knew like it was a streaming platform, but I don't think I followed anyone on Twitch. I didn't really know anyone who did Twitch. Like it wasn't like something that was like really like I'd ever like known about very much. I didn't know about the communities. So like Twitch is something like decently new for me, and something I like discovered over the pandemic. So missed out on the 2 months I could have been really, or 2 years that I could have been really into it.
right. Because for like 2 years, like I didn't start getting into this until the end of it, but there was that there was a whole point where I could have kind of been more invested,
Hmm.
just like that, just like your but hindsight's 2020, right? Like
Yeah, for sure.
that's kind of why we're looking back now is because there's that curious question of like and I'm saying like a lot you're hearing my inner Californian really come out because like is a language for us. um, but yeah, it's a pretty big question that I've been wondering about, and
Hmm.
I spend a lot of my time talking to other people on the net, and not like in a way where I have any type of license or certification in therapy, but people have just been missing a pretty huge aspect of their life in what is social, and
Hmm.
that's affected me the most. I think the most severely of anything.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Have you been? Sorry, this is like a random question, but now that you bring it up, are you relatively new to Twitch? Like doing
I've
it, streaming?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about 6 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, I was just working my ass off to make sure that I had the means to secure a good like shot at being here more often than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I've mentioned before, I'm very entrepreneurial. I used to have a small business in my mid 20s, and I took that into my early 30s, and then decided, to see if maybe getting a degree and working for somebody else would be like every answer I've found, working for something or somebody else that isn't in like tailored to my own interests, I eventually lose
Mm-hmm.
interest in that thing. Like I become apathetic at
Yeah.
that task.
Yeah, you're someone who can't like work the regular 9 to 5 with a boss. You said you like, yeah, you even run a business, and I feel like that's definitely more up your alley. You seem to need something more entrepreneurial, something more you're like much more involved in. And I do know people like that who it's like if you're not like actively like super involved in what you're doing, then like there's like just like no interest in it. So,
I feel the need to be like to invest into something.
mm-hmm.
Not in terms of like financial, of course that's part of it, but like this for me is an investment, and being able to like any other thing that I'm doing probably wouldn't give me the opportunity to even sit down with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Granted, the separation that exists between us geographically, I would rather be here having this conversation than working anywhere else for any type of hourly wage.
Yeah, for
When I
sure.
would be, I'd only be thinking about when it's time to escape.
Yeah,
And
when does
that's
the
another
clock run out kind of thing.
Right, and that's another thing too that I think that we've been dealing with, getting back to the larger topic, right? Is that you mentioned that we were given timelines, and we
Mm-hmm.
would think, very optimistically and a little bit naively, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, couple months,
Mm-hmm.
like it just kept getting further out, and then
Yeah.
eventually we just start looking at the clock, right? Like when do we get out of
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, and that was the thing is it felt almost like I don't know if you hit this, but during the pandemic, I definitely hit a point where I'm like, I don't know if we're ever getting out of this. And I know it's only been 2 years. People, I don't know why people keep rounding up, and I don't know if like pandemic started earlier for somebody else. I remember it happening in like March 2020, and everyone's like rounding up. It's like, oh, it's been 2.5 years. It's been 3 years. I'm like, what timeline are you people existing in? Because I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's like not even been 2 years for like, where at least where I am, and like people around me have been saying this, like we've been in this for 2.5 years. We've been in this for almost 3 years, and I'm like, no, okay, the year of math class you missed in high school due to the pandemic really fucked up your brain because everyone's like saying it's been 3 years, but I think everyone just like extends it because it feels like it's been so long, and that's what I kind of started to realize. Is I think everyone like in their head was like, oh, it's been like 2.5, 3 years, but I feel like it feels like it's actually been that long. Like it's been like years since we've started this, but like it's really like we're only coming up on the like end of a second year, like completing of like being in the pandemic, and there is part of me, I think, like even 6, 7 months ago, even when the vaccine rollout and stuff happened, it felt like, is this ever going to end? Like, are we ever actually going to like, and I know some people don't want to go back to normal. I think that's a whole other conversation about like what the new normal will look like, what the new normal should look like. But I think when people talk in like terms of like, we want it to go back to normal, it's like, I want to be able to like go to a restaurant without having to worry that like I have 7 people in my party, or like, I don't want to worry about like having to like take a vaccine passport everywhere. I don't want to have to worry about like having breakouts and school work shut down or school shut down, or hey, we're going off this week, or your exams are getting moved online. Oh, they're back in person. Like I think all of the like stress of like COVID, and like when we say like go back to normal, it just means go back to like a day-to-day life where you're not stressed about every little thing you do. And I think that's like the big, at least for me, it feels like when I say like I want to go back to normal, it's kind of like more that.
Yeah. And that's what I'm curious about as well, is when it comes to people's thoughts, and I'm hoping that we get some more interaction from your community as they come in and listen, and
Mm-hmm.
because that individual experience is what I'm curious about. And also, in addition to the greater health topic at hand that we can pull articles and studies and look at and have reference to, but there's that whole one of my questions in this whole experience is it going to get back to normal? Because I
Mm-hmm.
see things like big businesses where suddenly most of your staff can work remotely. So what does it even mean to have, you
Mm-hmm.
know, floors to yourself in a huge skyscraper? Like you are now able to find that this is a more cost effective way to run your operation. So
Mm-hmm.
what so are you even gonna like, and if you go back, is it gonna even be at the same physical scale now that it's not even necessary?
For
Like
sure.
there's and do people even want to go back? Like I bet there's probably people out there that are like you mentioned, like no, like if I can work from home, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
just gonna Zoom conference in and just look professional from the top up, and it's
Yeah.
like comfy from the hips down, what you can't
Yeah.
see.
For a lot of people, like, yeah, that like 2 hour commuting a day is like, damn, do I really want to go back to that? It's like, I like being around people in the office, but like, I have to drive. I have to get up at like 6 in the morning, get ready, leave by 7 in the morning, drive for an hour, get to work, work for 8 hours, and then drive another hour home. Like, I lose 2 hours of my day to like driving. I lose an hour getting ready for work, but it's like, man, if I like don't put on deodorant before I leave and my Zoom calls online, I'm like, I'm not screwed, right? Like it's that kind of thing. I think it's all the little things that people have like become really accustomed to is like that it's so much easier to not worry about.
Yeah.
Because I know companies even now, like I have friends who work for companies that went remote at the beginning of this, and now that they're talking about going back, for a lot of these companies, it's like, oh, we're gonna go down to like a 3 day work week where you're like here 3 days a week for like meetings and stuff, for days we have meetings, but then the other 2 days where you're just working on stuff like like one of my buddies is like a game programmer, and so like the other days a week, like they're like, you know what, we're gonna like 1 to 2 days a week, like it's gonna be like working from home, but 3 days a week, like you can come in, have your meetings, stuff that like needs to be in person, like can happen here. And it's like I think the company like realized like it's probably a lot easier to not have everyone in at once and not have all this other stuff going on, like having to worry about all these extra costs that like if you keep some of your stuff at home, you might not have those same level of costs. And I think I know even businesses who are just staying completely online who have decided like I've heard companies that decide that they're not going back at all and they're like, oh, we're just going to stay online, like we're saving a bunch of money, everyone seems to be still pretty productive, so what's the point of going back? And now like, damn, if you were looking forward to going back to an office, like shit, you're shit out of luck at that company.
Yeah, and some people that's kind of, I mean, there are people like me who when I get into an office, and I know that for me, I'm just going to be looking from the start of the day and where the day ends. But I'm sure there is a certain demographic of people who enjoy going to work to leave the house, like
Mm-hmm.
even though they are working, they're in an environment that is a different type of experience for them with a group, like a whole different your work people, like the people you work with tend to become kind of like an extended family,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in a sense. At least in my own experience, every place
Yeah.
that I've ever worked, there's always at least like some people that become like your clique,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's just what's familiar. And hopefully, for those partial reopens, those people who want to do that can. But for me, if I'm in that situation and I can still work at home, but I still get to associate with my coworkers
Mm-hmm.
and I'm learning about them on this remote basis,
Mm-hmm.
if we develop a genuine interest in each other and making like a friendship out of a relationship that's purely professional, then because we want to spend more time and hang out with each other and get to know each other better, be like, yeah, let's like go grab a coffee or let's go get a drink and like hang out like outside of work,
Mm-hmm.
but not have to be like forced to engage with each other all the time. Because I think that's, that's one thing that's problematic for me is like just being in small spaces with a lot of people. And in this way, like if we were working together, you're in your own space, I'm in mine. We can be close in proximity in terms of like how I'm viewing you on cam,
Yeah.
but there's thousands of miles between you and I at the very least, and all like in my apartment's all mine. Like it's anywhere that I want to go, I don't have to worry about like bumping into you or like fighting with you as a coworker over like a cop, like just
Yeah.
all those little minor inconveniences that no longer exist between us, if we were in that situation, aside from like making sure deadlines are met and if we're on a team that everyone's pulling their weight.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree with that because I think some people are like super comforted, like, being able to like keep that proximity. I think like I've heard from like certain neurodivergent people, like there are people who are really comfortable, like especially even if like they went back to like part-time work weeks where they could work a couple days from home to have that like time to themselves and like be a little bit away from people, but still like be doing their work and still being productive. I can see how that'd be super effective. I think that the only reason I don't like completely remote, I think there is something to be said about that human interaction piece between people. I think like as much as you can meet someone and like become friends with someone over the internet, I think there's something so different about meeting that person in person in real life and like having that like face to face interaction. I mean I like with psychology I know there is like a difference between like how you feel, like, you know, your emotions, your I think even empathy levels go up when you're like from like a Zoom call versus like when you're interacting like in person with someone like face to face. It's like it's a I think it's good for most people to have like that some level of like face to face interaction. And I feel like especially for people like you who are like living on their own, like in their own apartment, like if you're like living alone, holy crap, I can imagine how like pent up you might feel being away from people that long, especially if you had like strict lockdowns. Like again, I don't know exactly what your rules were there, but here there was a point in time where we had like really strict lockdowns, and you were basically like confined to the people in your house, and they like our government had to put in a rule that said like if you live alone, you can go and see one other person, because they realized how like destructive that could be for that like the person who lives alone. Like if you like work online and you don't get to go to your job and you don't live with anyone else, like you're super pent up at that point. Oh, hello,
Yeah.
bubonic bone. First time chatter.
And that's one of the most human thing. We're a social animal.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I mean there are those outliers who are asocial or antisocial and would just prefer to like always be left alone.
Yeah.
Those There's nothing wrong with wanting that type of existence, but on whole,
Mm-hmm.
there's we need interaction with each other. Like if I didn't have the opportunity to talk with people like you, even like during these weird times that we were living in, it probably would have been all the worse because I would have just had all of this energy and all of this curiosity and
Yeah.
nowhere to really put it because like I couldn't even be like a philosopher of old and be like I'm going to go and do some empirical research today. I'm going to go like cut blades of grass and look at trees and study the animals and take
Yeah.
notes because they're like you shouldn't even be outside like oh well
Yeah.
they can't.
Yeah. I
So
don't.
that
Yeah. I can't. It's kind of funny because I don't know. Again, I have no. I think you said you were. Are you okay with me saying where you are?
yeah it's
You're in Texas, right?
yes I'm in
Yeah.
Texas in the northern area of Texas.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like Texas, I mean, I would assume Texas was probably a little bit more lenient, but I have no idea. I figure like southern red states seem to like they didn't go as hard on the shutdowns, but I know at some points like everyone was shut down. But I know in places like Australia and here in Canada, there was parts of Canada that like it was illegal to basically like even leave like your front door kind of thing. Like it was like super hard. Like not that if you got caught, you would probably get a fine, but like you probably could still do things, but like I think a lot of people were too scared to even do it because like sometimes the restrictions were like unclear of what they really were. And at other times we kept hearing things like, yeah, you're not supposed to go out. If you go out and we find out you're like, oh, I know in Australia, I had a friend over there and I think she was in like one of the high case rates area. And they said like, basically you're not supposed to like leave 5 miles past your house. And it's like, man, that's like super intense. Like saying like, yeah, you can't like, so like if you live like 5 miles from like your nearest like, you know, park or whatever, like, I don't know, it feels like a super weird imposition on like somebody's life to like say how far you can leave your house.
Right?
And I feel like that's got. I feel like that even did down like to me and my friends. It was like, you know, there's times where you don't always because like we all have mental like my whole group's like a little bit of like bunch of mentally ill fucks, but to put it nicely. But you know, there was times where like we still like we had to like depend on each other and like for like support and stuff during this whole thing because like I don't think being away from like people you love and care about who are your support system is that good. So like there was times we met up, but it was like we were like really careful about how we met up because we're like shit if you have a neighbor who like sees like a couple cars in your driveway and then calls the cops or something, or like you have no idea what's gonna happen, right? Because like some people were super like intense about the restrictions and were super pissy about the restrictions. So if they saw you doing something wrong, they would call the cops. And I was like, damn, like now I have to be so careful about like how people see us and like how people like see you. And it felt very like unsettling. And I think that like probably did some damage to like at least how I looked at like the people around me because I think there was some level that was always like worried that like either people were judging you or that people were like looking at you wrong or that they might like call the cops on you because you're doing something wrong. And I think that was like a super scary thought.
Yeah, because you like this, so it gave people this weird ability to flex power in the
Mm-hmm.
way that they like normally wouldn't have access to because in places that were strict, you just had to have that one person who's like the rule keeper and punish all rule breakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think there was like definitely there's so many people and like I think people said it about the government a lot where the government went like really intense with the power because like people were like, oh, government's gone mad with power. And I think at certain times like government really did overstep the boundaries of like what they should have been doing with their power. But then there was definitely people who were like right on board with it and ready to like be like, yeah, I am the arbiter of like health and safety and I am like the one who's going to keep my society safe. And I think people were really excited to like jump down people's throat about doing the wrong things. And I saw it like on Twitter a lot or on news articles, like when I would read news articles about like the newest restrictions or what was going on or different cases. And you like scroll down through the comments and people were just like, oh, these people are idiots. Like, you know, you shouldn't be seeing family. Like, it's dangerous right now. And it's like, dude, people like need their families like and need their friends because like the, and this is what this whole video is about is like, there's a level of safety and precaution we needed to take for COVID itself, but I think we left out a lot of the precaution that we needed to take around other issues that would have came from that, right? Like, and again, like this whole idea of like the mental isolation. Like, I don't think a lot of times when we put in restrictions, we like took account for like mental isolation and like, especially like I said, we had restrictions here where it was like you can't actually go outside like your family household, right? Like you couldn't see anyone outside the people you were living with. So I'm like, if you're in an abusive household, like and you have been told that you can't see anyone else, like you've lost your entire support system that was outside that abusive household. And I think that was like and I know our domestic violence calls went up like I think it was like threefold or something during the couple months where that was in place. And that was super scary because I can't imagine like yeah, it was only a couple months, but like what that will do to a person over a couple of months is going to affect them for a lifetime. I also want to say
Yeah.
thank you to Cloud Van for the follow.
Yeah, so that's another thing too that I what how are people currently dealing with that? Because there are probably people out there who continue to live in very abusive environments with really no avenue for escape, right? Because you're locked in with this person and the possibility for movement at the most strict point was it wasn't nil, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't going to be an easy go to escape that type of situation. Um, and having to live with that amplified and more consistent level of violence, like how has that affected people? Like
Yeah.
I would like to know more about that. And I don't like if anybody's had those experiences, I'm not asking you to like share them in chat, but that's something that I'm curious about because clearly that can't be healthy. And I mean, like for obvious reasons, it's
Mm-hmm.
not good to do harm to other people, but like what does it do to a person's like level of trust in the
Mm-hmm.
situations, or do they become conditioned to it now they can just like withstand even more of it
Yeah.
than they could before?
And
If
now
that's
all of
a
a sudden when like those restrictions go up, now you're like, okay, it's not so bad. I can deal with this. And you might be I don't want to say it should deter like it would deter you from getting help or getting out of that situation, but I think that some people like might look at that situation and be like, "Oh, it's not so bad anymore." Like, you know,
it was
like
so much
it was
worse.
so much worse for those couple of months and like now it's like okay, this is fine, I can deal with this because I can leave the house a couple of times a week, I can go back to my job or like I can go see my friends a couple of times a week and get away from this and I'm okay, like you know I don't have to deal with it 24/7. And I think a lot of people probably had that sentiment after. And yeah, like I think all that is like so scary to like think about like how that might have affected people. No matter what society does, it comes with good and ill. The inner ugliness of people will always manifest. Yeah, and I think that's what we're talking about is like this idea that like government really tried hard to like take care of the COVID stuff and try to keep people safe from like the actual virus. But I think sometimes when we looked at like how do we you know keep people safe from like one thing, we all of a sudden started to gloss over a lot of other issues and like one thing was like domestic violence calls went up and like that was super overlooked where we were and like I don't think that was like taken into account. Or my other thing is the big one for me because this is something I was really passionate about before the pandemic was our drug overdose rates where I am, and it was actually crazy to see the numbers of drug overdoses because we actually had more people die where I am from drug overdose than we did have deaths from COVID. And it was like, holy shit, like we cared so much about saving these people from COVID, but we let like more people die from drug overdoses in the same period of time. And I think that was so like it was crazy to see because it's like we focused so hard on saving lives and this whole thing was supposed to be about saving lives and we actually lost more people because of it. And I think a lot of people didn't know how to feel about that because like it felt like government just kind of like let those people die, not let those people die, but like didn't care about those deaths as much because it was like it wasn't, you know, it wasn't what they were focused on. They were focused on COVID and it just all it could be was COVID and it couldn't be we couldn't talk about anything else for a long time, especially when it came to like government policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just read the couple of comments here. Isolation led to suicide increasing, social isolation really hard on people. Yeah, I think that's what it was here, like with the drug overdoses. I don't think necessarily it was just more people taking drugs. I think a lot of people were like, I think a lot of it was intentional. And like, I unfortunately know someone who lost someone to a drug overdose during that time. And they were already in a bad place. And then I think all the stuff with COVID exasperated that quite a bit. And that person, like, unfortunately, like, lost him to that. Miles Vivid, thanks for tuning in. We're talking about mental health. Several countries put treatment for things like cancer as non-essential. Government is not. Yeah, that happened here where I am. We're in Canada, and cancer, like especially for like biopsies and stuff, like getting like pre-cancer treatment, was considered non-essential. You can go respond to any of that, Sin.
Alrighty. So that's so the whole idea behind I'm curious about the suicide rates. Like if there are any hard facts on that, and I'm not like currently doing any research and pulling up facts as we
Mm-hmm.
go. So that's like what I'm offering is just kind of my own view on things. But that's something that I've been curious about, not because like, oh, like let's see if the like for the sake of numbers, but
Mm-hmm.
it's because the social isolation is so it's so unhealthy for us. Like not in the sense of where spending time alone is a bad thing, because decompressing and reconfiguring and reflecting, those are all healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But the forced separation, especially when you've known something for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and what amount of people out there who was like, this was like, what is the whole like, what is this for? The existential question, like, what do I do? Like, all I wanted in life. Then there were people out there like, I just wanted to be around people. I wanted the human touch. I wanted the human experience, and that thing that is fundamental to my existence is currently being denied, and I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
it's ever going to come back.
Yeah, no, for sure. Cloud or Ben, you can share links indeed. Yeah, I mean that was kind of I kind of want to build on that point because I think like it wasn't just this idea of like social isolation, but almost a feeling like social isolation will fuck you up, but like maybe that feeling of like hopelessness of like, am I going to get the things back that I love? Am I going to get to be able to just be around people I love? Am I going to be able to like especially if you live like kind of far from your family, if you didn't have like the means to travel and see them during the pandemic or be near them during the pandemic? I think a lot of people probably had. I'm sure a lot of people like. I wonder like how many people like passed from like, or yeah, just like committed suicide over the fact that like it was like this helplessness of like never knowing when it was gonna end and never knowing when you're gonna get the things back that you loved. Miles Vivid here said, I think Canada was scared of the hospitals being overwhelmed because they were not prepared. So instead of spending money on hospital staff, etc., they locked shit down. Yeah, that's, I don't know if you are from Canada, but I definitely know, like, my family's been here a long time. And my aunt was even saying, she's like, dude, the hospitals here, like, we built that hospital when she was, like, young, and it has not been expanded on since. And that's, like, 50 years later. And the hospital's, like, still the same size. We also, like, yeah, we were understaffed. Like the hospital should have been expanded way before this, and it just was something that never got taken care of, and we just did not build the infrastructure for it when we should have, and then we really quickly thought we were going to get overwhelmed, and we weren't prepared. And I think that was like the bigger issue is we started to see like how badly infrastructure had failed before the pandemic. Like this is something we should have been probably able to handle better than we did in terms of like hospital numbers and being able to adapt to those hospital numbers, but we couldn't because like you know the hospitals were not built for that, and they had never been expanded despite like our population growing really rapidly. It wasn't something that was ever like taken care of in advance.
I like I like, and I'm saying this facetiously, but I like how the response was to lock the hospitals down. Like we had very measured military response here, which
Mm-hmm.
was where we would send in like our medical divisions of our armed forces to areas that were like inundated with too much work, um,
Oh,
to help shoulder the load. And that's like I'm very rarely like in favor of military involvement in civilian life,
that's fair.
but I feel like that was the right approach and that
Mm-hmm.
it could have been utilized to a greater degree still. Like, you know, you don't want people in concentrated areas, but the fact like the military can come in and set up auxiliary care units really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, you know, there will be people who are unable to, you know, they'll get sick and they won't be able to function within their part. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that it was helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and and I take it there was no similar like not even like the National Guard or whatever the armed forces equivalents are of like coming in and assisting the civilian operations with their resources.
As far as I know, I don't believe so. I don't remember hearing anything about our armed forces coming in. Miles Vivid might have. You might be from a different part of Canada than I am, but at least on the West Coast, I don't remember that ever happening with like military being involved. It was crazy the shit military saw in some of the long term care facilities really messed up. Oh, okay, so maybe they did have military at places, and I might just not be aware of like everything. Oh yeah, I think you could probably relate to this because I think this was like across the board, like pretty much. But like long term care homes saw like massive numbers of deaths. Like most of the deaths, like here even now, are like from care homes, and it's so sad. And kind of bringing this a little bit around to our mental health discussion, I've had people who had family in care homes during this time, and the lockdowns on care homes to the point that they could not see anybody outside the care homes because that's what it was. Like there was a point where care homes were locked down, like you could not have visitors in care homes because the obviously numbers were really high. I know so many people who said like I think my grandparents didn't die like from like anything else in there except for like the isolation piece. Like they couldn't talk to any of their friends in the care home because they like didn't allow a lot of intermixing within the care home, and then you couldn't have like any visitors in the care home. And so many people I know said like, I talked to them on the phone, and like over the year, like I just saw like heard I could hear it on the phone, like hear them like deteriorate so like emotionally and mentally, that I think like they didn't pass from anything other than that like isolation piece of being in a care home locked up alone for like months on end. And that was like pretty heartbreaking too, is like I get it, we needed to take care of because like this was a very vulnerable population, but there had to be a better way than just locking these people away for 6 months in like almost a prison level of like situation. The conditions in some of the long term care places were horrible. Might as well have been a prison. Yeah, that's what I've heard that definitely. I don't know if you can expand on that at all, Sin, where you are.
Um, well, I didn't know anybody that worked in any of the long-term care facilities, but I do have cousins who work in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
and they were definitely overworked.
Yeah.
It was stressful because if you were healthy, you had to be there, and it wasn't just a sense of like you were demanded to be there, but because of their careers in care,
Mm-hmm.
that they're very much we share like our family shares a very similar mindset when it comes to personal responsibility. Like if I am in the position of care and it is within my ability to give said care,
Mm-hmm.
then I should like do that thing. I should
Yeah.
go and I should work. And even if I'm tired, it's better that I'm there sharing the burden than everybody else having to make up for my absence. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
so, and it was never like being guilted. And that, of course, with overtime, there's financial incentives too. They make good money, especially in times of hazard. So there's all sorts of ways that make the time more worthwhile than just the sense of like own like self importance and
Mm-hmm.
an obligation. But but it's definitely That's every day. Even now, even I have friends that are dreading, going to work because they don't know how many people are not going to show up,
Hmm.
and that makes the workday longer. Even, I mean, outside of healthcare, healthcare's, you know, thankfully, it's at least from what I understand, the numbers in the U.S. are going down,
Hmm.
so it's stabilizing, right?
Yeah.
Which is good. We want it to stabilize so that way when something else occurs, because we're going to be going into spring soon and allergies and all sorts of things are going to set off all sorts of false positives and worries, and
Yeah.
it's just going to be another influx. But there's time right now to like to breathe, right? To take
Yeah.
that to breathe
To
for a
reset
moment.
almost.
Yeah, and kind of and realize that you're not out of the storm, you're just in the eye of it.
Hmm.
And
And now
that
you
as
still have to
soon
get
as
out
this
of it.
calm, yeah, as soon as this calm passes, you're right back in it until it's completely gone. But this is your moment to just like rest, reconfigure, and figure out like and plan the like what we do from here.
Hmm.
Because this is a critical phase. Like how do we get people reintroduced into the world? Should we even push for that? How much control have they experienced, and what effect has it like? Was it something that we needed to see? Like, did they need to see which people could be better controlled, so that way they know which ones are like can be told what to do? Like,
Hmm.
did that make people kind of like in a military mindset where it's like now they're used to being ordered around, so they'll just accept it? Like, then did
Yeah.
how did that happen? It's like, and it looks like you have some things going on in chat, so I'll let you
Yeah,
get
I
to it.
got thank you Miles Vivid for the cheer. I That's my first one. I only recently got monetized, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Um yeah, I mean it almost gets into like that bit of that like conspiracy-ish land, which I don't like to like super get into because I don't for me, I love to engage in conspiracy theory in my own time for like fun, but I don't think I like to like promote it because I think it can, sometimes like if like the wrong people see your thing, they're gonna take it like super seriously, and run with it. And I think that like can be, I try to be like responsible with my rhetoric as much as possible, but I think there is that idea of like, especially with governments, I'm a little bit of an anarchist, so I don't love when governments like try to push stuff on people. And I think this idea of like with COVID, they were almost like limit testing of like how far could they push a population before you kind of started getting pushback. And I think there probably was a little bit of that by government to see like where their population was at, just in terms of like acceptance of like rules and all that type of stuff.
Oh, and looks like there's a link. I'll
Oh
take a
yes.
look at.
I see a lot of stuff talking about data, but I'm having trouble getting data. Medical Express shows that suicide has been going up since 1999 through 2019. Hardly an explaining factor. Yeah. Sometimes it also, maybe I can give a little bit of input on this, just because I've done some research classes, and it's part of what I do at university. Let's see if I can switch. There we go. Um, Avoid unfounded claims about suicide. The holiday season usually has the lowest monthly suicide rates, and while COVID-19 pandemic has increased risk factors associated with suicide, the media and public should be careful this holiday season not to make unfounded claims about suicide trends. So this one seems to be saying that suicide trends didn't go up. The only problem sometimes I have with certain studies is how you count suicide. So a lot of times, like here, I think a lot of our overdose deaths were counted as like drug deaths, but not suicide. Because if you can't get like accurate for suicide, I think a lot of times there has to be some level of indication, because obviously you can't ask someone who's committed suicide whether they committed suicide on purpose or whether they did it by accident. Like you can never know that reason. So obviously if it's something like, they jumped off a bridge, you can pretty much accurately assume that it was suicide. But like for stuff like drug overdoses, A, they went super underreported, and B, they won't always attribute stuff like drug overdoses to suicide, because especially if someone lives on the street, a lot of people will just assume that it was overdose and not a suicide. Or like people who are like, yeah, like people in tough situations. It can be really hard to like get accurate numbers on suicide. But let's see. About half of the newspaper stories that connected the holidays and suicide contained misinformation, falsely perpetuating the myth that suicide increased over the holidays. According to the new analysis by APPC of University of Pennsylvania. When was this from? December 2020. So yeah, this was approximately like what, a year and a bit ago. So I'd be interesting to see if there was like a study that they cite here, because I don't necessarily like going, like articles can be good. I don't necessarily like reading articles, just because articles can like put stuff in a way that like it can push like everyone changes the narrative. But like there's so many times where I'll read a study and read like an article that covers that study, and it's not always like presenting the right narrative of what the original study was trying to say. So if they have a link to the, oh, it's not going to be something I can access. Let's see. Perpetuating the holiday suicide myth. Inaccurate stories this year predominantly appeared in smaller news outlets. News often publishes well-intentioned stories, features at the time of design to help people find the holiday season. Let's see. Is there any like actual claims that they put here? Years ago when I served as a... Oh, so this is just like claims that they've heard. Okay, so this looks like it's just going over like some of the myths that came out, but it doesn't seem like... Oh, let's see. CDC data from 2018, latest available. The next lowest rates were November 11th and January 10th. In 2018, the highest rates were June, July, August. 2019 analysis found 33 articles linking the holiday and suicide were almost evenly split. 17 upheld the myth, and 16 debunked. Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's like super clear information. I think sometimes that's the thing is like I don't know. Oops, I don't know if right now there's like enough information that's been like, because so many research places have been like focused on the COVID stuff. It's really hard to find data on like any other type of like trends that have happened over the last couple of years, especially when it comes to like other types of deaths. But yeah, I know for sure where I am, at least drug overdoses, which can or cannot be attributed to suicide, did definitely go up. I think suicide went up in I want to say 2020, but they came back down in 2021 is what I'm pretty sure. I don't think we'll know the full results for a few more years. Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
Yeah, because that data. So there's a couple things. Is that so? One of the reasons why I'm more kind of speaking anecdotally about this topic is the the effort that has to go into vetting resources academically. It is taxing
Yeah.
because you have to cross-reference articles. You have to see if they're peer reviewed. If they're on a website, you have to see if there's who their advertisers are. There's a lot of critical assessment that has to go into it, and that's not to discount any type of findings that you find out there. It's just you have to study them very meticulously to see what the truth is that, or if there's some sort of lean or slant, depending on sponsors, what have you. And everybody's going to have kind of their own bias, regardless of who's writing it. Even if you try to be like absolutely scientific and objective, you're still going to have your life experience guiding that process.
Yeah.
But at least in this way, at least people talking to us and sharing their own experiences, it gives us a primary source and example. Like for me, the primary source is the most valuable form of data, and that's a person's subjective experience. And granted, it depends on what you're trying to put that data set into, because I also do need to see the science that we're not going to have available to us for another couple of years, because I want to see what has happened with things like suicide and depression, and general different types of like I want to see if we end up with like a spike from the last 2 years, because we're pretty extreme situations around the world. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. The other, along with like suicide statistics, I think another really interesting statistic to see would be, I think this is a much harder one to get, but people, like the feeling of economic security among people. I think the other thing that, like, I think that's like another big one I've heard is like, at least with people who have anxiety, or like people, anxiety is has spiked since COVID, and not all of it has to do with like being scared of COVID. I know a lot of people who are in like, we talked a little bit about this earlier, especially at the early bits of the pandemic, of like that financial security of feeling like you had either no idea where your next paycheck was coming from, or at least for us, like we had our government benefits like kick in, like we had a stimulus pretty much every month for a long time. But there was points where like we were talking about getting rid of that, but we're like, I don't have another job yet because I still can't go to apply for jobs because everything is still shut down. So if stimulus stops, then I can't pay for anything. Like I think the economic security, especially after with like inflation going up, like do people feel like they can't afford like basic things that they once did? Do they feel like they like are scared about being able to pay bills? I think all of that like comes into play a little bit of like people worried about just different economic aspects of their life. And I think that's like the other interesting, like I would like to see like even like a basic survey study of like how people felt like after the pandemic of like financial security, I guess.
You brought up an interesting point, and one of the things too that I see that is an after effect, like, and I guess this could be also like one of the fallouts of like the mental health and the fallout of COVID in particular, is that now we have people who in the US we had a pretty generous unemployment package. Like people were making more during
Mm-hmm.
COVID impact than they might have been working full time. So I'm not saying that people overwhelmingly didn't want to go back to work, but they would reassess. Like they came into a pretty deep
Mm-hmm.
introspective point in their life where they're like, if this is how much my minimum worth not going to work, then why have I been working for? And not to be like, not to be lazy, but you find these individuals less likely to return to that place from which
Mm-hmm.
they were employed and have put, and some people were very proactive about it and sought out education and certification and something else. So that way they could come out of 2 years of inactivity
Mm-hmm.
with a new skill and hopefully a new job or career path.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of places now. Like I can drive down the main road and I can see everybody's hiring. And those positions aren't being filled as quickly as they would like them to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, especially within the service industry, people are just like, nah, bro.
Yeah. Because I think people felt like after it was like not a it was like either garbage conditions, especially in the states with your how you pay servers. That is a whole other topic I won't get into, but holy shit, I will never get over that the states doesn't pay servers minimum wage. But I think like yeah, especially for like server jobs and like working in restaurants or working public service jobs that pay minimum wage, I think nobody felt good about going back to that situation feeling like you're gonna get taken advantage of. Especially when like everyone there then like grocery store workers like who make minimum wage were considered essential workers and you got nothing for that and now you're working during a pandemic where especially if you were like super nervous about COVID and you were super scared about COVID, all of a sudden you're working a job where you're at high risk because you're still interacting with a bunch of people in the public. People still don't treat you well. You're getting paid like a shit wage, and the people who are on benefits from the government are making more than you for not doing anything. And so I think a lot of people just felt like, shit, what is the point? Like, holy crap! And it's not like not it's not that I agree with that mentality, but I can understand where it comes from because like now you're like sitting here like, man, it's either like I get off work and make like twice as much money and don't have to deal with any of this bullshit, or I continue working, deal with the bullshit, and like my friends are all making more money than me doing nothing. Yeah, as Cloward Van said, incentivizing not working is a dangerous game. And I think a lot of people like now like are kind of looking towards UBI, and I'm not necessarily against UBI, but I think it has to be done strategically. Just in some senses, I think like it can be a hard thing to implement in a way that's not gonna either disincentivize your population or screw over your economy so badly that it essentially means nothing. And I think like there's a lot of other factors like people talk about wanting UBI, but I don't think a lot of people like think about all the things that come with like what a sorry, for anyone who doesn't know what UBI is, it's universal basic income. It's the idea that like government would pay everyone like a basic baseline like level of income that would like get you through, and anything you make on top of that is like basically like yours, but everyone in the society would get like some basic level of income. I'm the other way around. Raising the floor only causes the ceiling to raise. We need to lower the ceiling. Yeah, I would probably agree more with that strategy a little bit. Yeah. Sid?
Yep. I was just taking a look at everything that was being written, and
Yeah.
well, there's a lot of things to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
But most notably, there's the idea of a universal basic income.
Mm-hmm.
In the States, we're wrestling with the idea of like the raise to it. Like we have the closest they'll ever come to that is like a minimum wage. Like,
Yeah.
and then even raising the minimum wage has people up in arms. Like it's who would have thought that the idea of paying people more money so it would be such a controversial idea, right? Like
Yeah.
something that at its core seems like a good idea is to increase the amount of money you're making and not just to print more money so that
Hmm.
way everybody has more money because that's you don't want to do that, right? That decreases the value of your currency.
Hmm.
But pay people more. Um, because we already know, at least I know anecdotally and from my own experience that I work way harder to maintain the same standard of living every year than I did the year before.
Mm. Yeah.
And I have to diversify and I have to be proactive and look for other avenues of gain because the world doesn't keep pace. It doesn't give us like the idea for us of a minimum wage, like a universal, like a federal minimum wage that they want to be like $15.
Hmm.
You can't stop there.
Yeah.
Every year it has to increase. There has
Hmm.
to be a baseline minimum to keep pace with the inflation
Yeah.
because you can't just because we've our federal minimum wage is still something ridiculous like
It's
725. That's like
725. It's like
yeah,
ridiculously low.
725. Seven you if you were in the 80s, the 1980s, you were balling on 725 because it was that would have been absurd. I think my mom in the 80s when I was a kid was making like 275. It was really tiny. Like the minimum wage was really tiny, but her rent was also like $200 a month. And,
Hmm.
granted wage inflation yada yada, but still like if you took that 725 back to the 80s, everybody balling out of
Hmm.
control. You take that now, that barely gets you anything you
I
work an
don't
hour and a
think.
half just to
Yeah.
go to McDonald's.
Yeah. Exactly. I remember I did this on stream. Like I think probably like close to a month ago now, where we were talking about minimum wage and like I don't remember if it was with you or if it was my group. I think it might have just been like an off stream where I was like talking about it, and we actually looked up your federal minimum wage because ours I don't know what our federal one is. I think it's 15. I think our federal is 15 now. Actually, no, I could be wrong about that. I know BC it's 15. But in the states, like we looked it up, and like your federal minimum wage is like 7.25, and I'm like, okay. In the states, I'm not for a federal minimum wage just because like I'd probably put it somewhere around $10. But like your states all differ so vastly in what their like cost of living is that like I don't know if a federal minimum wage is the way to go. It probably should be like varied state to state. But like we looked it up, and 7.25 nowhere in the states is like a livable wage. And I was like, oh, okay. So like 7.25 doesn't get you anywhere in any state ever. I think like the lowest that we found was like that like the like lowest minimum wage that you could have in like the cheapest state was like around $10. So like the federal minimum wage would have to be at least that to like be able to get you like minimum wage in like the cheapest state to live in, kind of thing. So like yeah, that's crazy to me that it's still 7.25, and that there's actually states that still pay 7.25 as their minimum wage. Because some states obviously have like raised it and made it higher, but like there is still states where like the minimum wage is 7.25, and that's like crazy to me because that is like in no place a livable wage.
And I agree with that. I saw some things coming up that Cloward is.
Hmm.
I very much appreciate the contributions from the chat because
Oh yeah.
this is like where I hope discussions like this go is being able to engage individuals like that. So if there's anything you want to get a look at before
Oh yeah,
I
I
take
can
a reply.
for sure. Let's see. It's all in the framing. Market determines value. Value is determined by scarcity and job danger and other factors too. Increasing minimum is in direct I can't talk today. Conflict with market value of work. Yeah, I think some people look at this like really simply, and I think like no one really has a good grasp of economics. I don't even have a good grasp of economics, but I think I might be a little bit better than the average person in the sense that I can say like it's not just like, oh, price of living goes up, so minimum wage needs to go up. It's like, I think people don't understand how many factors that like these little changes, like even changing like that $5 up in minimum wage can make a big difference to like maybe like local cost of business, all this type of stuff. Like it's all very interconnected, and most people don't realize how easily these things can fluctuate in terms of like their fluctuation in terms of each other. Then he says, hence why increases to minimum tends to raise ceiling, and thus the problem repeats. Good documentary on minimum pay raise in New York, destroying the car washers and causing more mechanization. Yeah, yeah, this is pretty much what I was saying. Is like these things all influence each other way too much for like to be just like, oh, we're gonna raise the minimum wage. Well, okay, that doesn't really help if you raise minimum wage and then every store raises its price by like $3 per item, and now your minimum wage increase like doesn't really change anything, right? And obviously that's like a really simplified version, but I think like like to like really simplify that concept of like, yeah, like you're paying people more, so now businesses, it costs more to employ people, and now you have to like increase the price of like what your goods are in the business. Yeah, you gotta lower the ceiling cost, which is also a really hard thing to do because right now we use a lot of cheap labor, but so it's hard to get cheaper labor. But like maybe if we could like, sometimes I worry about like what globalization has done, because like we're getting cheaper labor overseas, but the cost of like shipping, not only to like actual physical cost of a business to like ship products, environmental costs are obviously very high too. Like we're screwing people over in terms of like climate change. So I think there's like a lot of ways that we could like fix our labor markets, but I don't think they're easy fixes, and so no one wants to talk about them. Make things more affordable for more people. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'll let Sin talk here now. Maybe reply to any of that.
Yeah, so I agree that the most the most effective thing to being able to have people experience a better standard of life would be to lower the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that comes at being able to use energy more abundantly and more efficiently, and not just like build more power plants, burn more coal, like to be able to utilize more effectively the resources that are already brought to us. Bringing the cost of production down would help ensure that things are therefore more affordable as a consequence. In the perfect world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some
Yeah, of
places will
course.
be like, oh, that costs less, but we're just going to keep prices the same and hope
Mm-hmm.
no one notices. But that's I would want to see some sort of move in that direction, and that has a lot to do with places adopting more renewable energy resources,
Mm-hmm.
or those things. I think there's a township somewhere in Germany that there was an article about where it pretty much like is self-sustaining most of the time because everything is solar, and it's not what it runs on by itself,
Yeah,
but it's well enough that the cost of living there for energy purposes is pretty low, and that would
yeah.
be an ideal. Um,
Something like solar. Solar is good. I think the big thing that this is obviously we're tangenting again, but I really advocate for nuclear energy, and I know people have like really bad conceptions of like nuclear energy because of all the stuff that happened in Japan. But oh my god, if like there's two major types of like nuclear power plants. I don't know the names or the differences, but there's the type that they use in like Japan and some type of like in some of the East Asian countries. However, there's the Canadian made nuclear energy plants, and those designs are like basically like there is no chance of having really big issues with those. And that's, I think we have them in Ontario, and some of our power in Ontario is that nuclear energy. And I think there's a couple places, I think California has some of these plants, and I think there's other places in the States that have them too. And they're way more energy efficient. They're less harmful to the environment because like it can be there's like less damage to like the ecosystems around it and stuff like that. Even with like the weight, like taking care of the waste, it's way less than other energy types. So like I very much advocate for moving towards nuclear energy. Yeah, nuclear energy is just fine, as Cloud Van said. It just has to be done right.
so that's my that's sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
there.
no, go ahead.
That's my controversial take, is that I am 100% in agreement with the idea of more nuclear research. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not like a nuclear expert or anything. I would never wax poetic about it. But from what I understand, there's two different types, right? There's fusion, which we use now, and or fissure, which we use now, and fission. And we're trying to work towards nuclear fusion, which I think the byproduct is hydrogen. It's not hydrogen peroxide, but it's something that the byproduct is more
It's
easily
yeah, It's
And
like non-reactive.
yeah, so the problem is that we found the way to do it to, but we're using more energy than it puts out, which is weird, right? Because it's all energy that exists, has always existed. Like it, there's some sort of loss in the calculation that's occurring
Hmm.
where what you put in is what you should be getting out.
Yeah.
And I think, but we can only like get to that technology if we keep investing into it, right? Like we do have to have those nuclear centers to get closer to the heart of that question.
Is it
And
sustainable? Yeah.
yeah, and I think that, it does. Like that's so it's a great resource of energy, but it's also very dangerous because, there's always, no matter how safe and secure it is, and how well built, there's always the possibility for something
There's always risk.
catastrophic to
Yeah.
happen.
You never
And
know.
that's the big concern, right? And it takes a
Hmm.
long time for the half-life of a nuclear product to degrade to the point to where
Hmm.
life can be there once again. But it's not to say that we shouldn't be exploring it at all. And we do need to bring down the cost of production, and that's one way to do it. And the only way that we'll get better at doing it is to continue to use it.
Hmm.
So we're at the catch 22, right? Like
Yeah.
we keep using it, we'll get better at it. If we don't use it, then whatever stuff is out there that's problematic, because it's still out there, is going to be worse. You have to
Yeah.
make advances either way, because there's old technology out there that's going to be continue to be in use, and even when it's not, we're not going to know what to do with it. So you still have to look. You
Yeah.
still have to look.
I want to respond to like an earlier comment that I seem to have missed. Less monopolies, more competition in general can lower ceilings. Monopolies have too much control and price setting. I 100% agree with this. I think I have a lot of issues with monopolies, especially like the big one right now that we tend to talk about a lot is like social media monopolies with like the metaverse and stuff. But I think this applies to like a lot of things. Like we talk about like big business. The idea of like monopolies have really like fucked over some of our economy, and I think that's like a big issue. I love small business. I try to support small business as much as possible. But right, it's so hard because small businesses have to like you do have to pay so much more for like small business work, even though you want to support local, you want to support like communities and stuff like that. It can be really hard because like the thing that I'll get at the small business for like $5, I might be able to get at Walmart for like $1. And so like these like big corporations have been like, and the more we do it, and like I know now we're like setting up Amazon warehouses where I am, and it's like it's a little bit scary because it's like we know that where there have been Amazon warehouses previously, like around in like other areas and other towns, it's really screwed over smaller businesses there. And I think a lot of people are worried, like small businesses where I am, like about losing either employees or losing business and like being like actually pushed out by like Amazon and stuff like that. So yeah, I completely agree with like probably putting some level of like restrictions on monopolies, or even just like major corporations and like how many like places they can set up. I'm not like I'm a pretty libertarian person, but I think with like corporations and stuff, it gets like really hard for me to take that stance just because I think there's way too much power in it, and I think it hurts too many people. Um, let's see. Right, the calculation is wrong somewhere if you're creating energy somehow. We have a lot of old facilities from I think the 60s. They need to be updated, replaced. It's very expensive. Small versus big. Yeah. 1 second here, son. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Sorry about that. My mom walked in. My bad.
It's all right.
Living with parents, it'd be like that.
Yep.
I was like, shit, I gotta close the camera so she's not on the camera.
It's just part of Twitch bingo, right?
Yep.
Someone's parents walk in.
Someone's parents walk in. Let's see. Where were we? Sorry, I was just going through the comments just so I can get reply because I do like interacting with comments too. Um, let's see. Small versus big business is more of an ethical argument than anything else, but definitely better than what we've got. International equals worst. National equals second worst. Yeah. Yeah. I think, especially after COVID, it's really. I feel really bad for a lot of small businesses that got screwed over by COVID, because so many like locally here shut down, and so we had like a lot of like the small businesses, like there was a little cafe that my mom's been going to since like I think the 60s, like when she, or not 60s, since like the 80s when she was in university, and it like had to shut down because it couldn't like withstand the shutdowns like from like COVID and stuff like that. And I think it was really sad to see a lot of those goes. and we saw that like big businesses did just fine because they were allowed to stay open. And I think like that was another, going back to like the COVID thing that this was all originally like catered towards, is like the big businesses where like the corporations at the top would have been fine, didn't get screwed over, and they just continue to make more money. But the actual people on the ground, like who had small businesses, all of a sudden lost their means of income because COVID shut them down, and now they can't even afford to reopen or continue their business post COVID. And it's like another one of those losses that we like did not account for. It's like, you know, lost people to COVID, but we also now like have people who are like super impoverished because they like lost their job or lost their business and can't get it back.
Yeah. I actually knew someone personally, a good friend of mine, had just opened up his like business one year prior to all this happening, and was finally building some ground, getting a good customer base, and then everything shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do any care packages immediately through the government, and there was really no type of insurance
Mm-hmm.
for small business owners, and he ended up having to close his doors, and he had kind of put everything that he had, like he put everything he had going into it, and it just went bust. And not for normal circumstances, like, people would be like, oh, you just had a bad business model, or you were just not a good salesperson, or any type of things that can make a business fail
Mm-hmm.
did not apply, because the government literally said, um, you can't have your doors open. People can't come in and buy things from you. And that's the entirety. Like, that
Mm-hmm.
is the core of how he operated his business. And I don't know if he personally has like quite recovered from that. I mean, like, not from a financial situation, but from that point, which is mental, right? Because
Yeah.
that's
You put everything into like this passion you had, and now it like got ripped away really suddenly, and there was like no chance to like figure any of that out or even like mourn that like project.
yeah. And you had no say on whether or not you wanted to be like considered essential, because
Yeah.
if you were non-essential, then you couldn't work. And it's like, well, if I'm and then like things would happen where the bills are still piling up. He's still under contract. He was in a lease for the place that he was renting, and the people that were in charge of the property, just they're like, well, you still got to pay. And there were all sorts of things that helped prevent evictions and foreclosures and stuff like that. There were things that kind of came into place to mitigate issues as they arise, but there's still a long-standing bill after the fact, and he's not getting any income from his business because he can't, because he's told he can't. And it's just like the amount of stress and and other types of things that are associated with that responsibility, and then being home,
Mm-hmm.
and not being able to earn, and being told that you can't, like, all of these things did not affect him in a very positive way. And I don't think
Yeah.
that they and he's now reevaluating, right? He thought he had it figured out,
Yeah.
and then the world said, not quite.
Not
What is
quite.
what how 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 tragic,
Yeah.
and also it's like a tragic comedy, because it's just like the universe was like, everything is going right, but it's
Yeah.
never as right as you think
It
it
like
is.
as it falls into place, it like the table gets flipped and all of your pieces are all over the floor again. And it's like you finally
Yes.
got to this point where you felt stable or you felt like you were finally doing what you wanted, and it's all gone in the blink of an eye. I think that's it's sad. Like, and again, like it goes back to this thing for me of like, you know, it was really important that we took care of COVID, and I'd never want to mitigate that idea that like we needed to like, make sure that people didn't die from this virus. But I cannot help the fact that like, or I can't help thinking about like all the people that we did screw over in the same time. Like hearing stories like that, it's like, man, like, do you think him having his business stay open during the pandemic would have cost that many people, more people, their lives? Like, even if we kept businesses open, I wonder if like if we had just said like, hey, it's gonna be like every business has to have a mask mandate, and you can only have X amount of people in your store at a time, and then that's like would that have mitigated enough? Like, would we have like lost that many more people if we had gone that route?
Yeah.
And
And when
there's no way to tell, but like, and like, we can't say for sure if it would have like, caused a ton more death if we had kept stores open or at least small businesses open. But yeah, it's just like it's really hard to like weigh that, I think, in a lot of people's heads, especially like people who looked at it like, because I think a lot of people did get caught up in like looking at COVID, and it's like anytime you suggested like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, people were like, no, 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 people are gonna die, like, you know, there's a virus, like we have to do everything to stop this, like we need to lock down, lockdowns need to keep going. And it's like, man, sometimes it made me think that people couldn't look outside their own bubble, like people couldn't look outside their own lives, especially people who had like cushy lives. Like if you had a desk job where you could work from home and you like live with a couple friends or you lived with family and you were okay, a lot of those people I found were like super like hyped up on COVID and like, you know, we're like, you know, lockdowns need to go, we can't open up schools. And it's like, man, you are looking from such like a selfish perspective that it makes me a little bit like, I worry about people like that who can't see what life was like for anybody else during the pandemic. Yeah, I think that was for me. Like, I definitely saw like a lot of people. My mom's a teacher, so seeing like some of the families she worked with who like the kids had to go online, but it's like she works in an inner city school. Like these kids didn't have enough. They had to send iPads home with kids so that they could attend online school because these kids had like no technology in their house. And I think like a lot of people who said like we need to keep the school shut down, like kids are at risk and stuff like that. It's like these kids are at risk of not getting an education and having their whole future screwed over. Like the kids were not at a big, you know, risk of the virus, but like people still wanted to lock that down and stuff like that. And it's like, man, people who were like super for that, I like couldn't help but be like, man, you are speaking from a super privileged position if that's like your take, because like there's a lot of people who cannot have that happen again or can't go back to like online school or go back to like not like online school and like distance learning and distance education because like they just don't have the means to. Yeah, I think that was hard to watch. Like just people be so narrow-minded and so stuck up, so up in their own bubble in their own world that they couldn't see past it.
The closing of schools was something that I wish was approached a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean that's another thing about what I want to know and what I'd like to learn about is, you know, people who are parents or otherwise had children in their care, like what how did it affect you? Like having to figure out if someone could either of you even be home.
Mm-hmm.
And who are you going to let into your house that's even allowed if no one can be home? Or does someone got to give it up and now your house is suffering from the income
Mm-hmm.
hit because the kids can't be unattended, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
not knowingly unattended. I'm sure there were some households where they were like, yeah, you're like 11 or 12. You're just going to get up. You're going to go to school. Mommy and daddy have to go to work
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing we can do about it. We're sorry. And then hope and pray that they're not, you're going to come home and your house is still intact, right? Because kids are kids.
Kids are kids, yeah.
Um, yeah, so left unsupervised, some I'm sure there were some things where like, yeah, I thought, I could just leave my kid home alone and they just go to school and then I came home and the house is burned to the ground. I wonder
Yeah.
how that happened. Oh, I was really hungry and I just wanted to microwave a hot pocket, so I wrapped it in foil. Right?
Oh
Just
shit, yeah, can
weird,
you imagine?
weird. Yeah, like it wouldn't be out of milk and like any
Yeah.
any type of malicious intent. It would just be from like kids being kids and just using things that they
Kids
think
who've never
that
had
they
to make
know
their own
how
lunch
to.
all of a sudden like they're like, okay, I'm gonna make my own lunch now.
Yeah, be like, oh, I really love grilled cheese. I've seen mom or dad make a grilled cheese easy.
I
You
can
just
cook egg
turn
in the
this
microwave.
on. Yeah, you just turn this on, the light gets red, then the thing gets hot, and you put it on there, and then it gets done. And then there's like this whole process of things catching on fire and burning that
Yeah.
they were unaware
They
of.
burnt their hand, the pot's on fire, parent comes home and you're like, oh shit.
Yep. They're like, what did you do? And you're like, you told me to take
Yeah.
care of myself.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
I
just a
also
kid.
that's like one side of it. I also wonder, like for me, I'm pursuing a career in youth criminal justice. So for me, my worry is like with stuff like this, and obviously it wasn't that long of a time, but 2 years is quite a bit of time that kids were probably less supervised than they've ever been because like again, like you said, there was parents who had to like continue working, didn't have any care for their kids, and they're like, well, like I can't take time off work, so my kid's gonna like, they're end of elementary school. I'm sure they can stay home for the day. I wonder how it might affect delinquency patterns over the last couple of years, and like what the youth intervention with like the justice system, or at least like with like low delinquency rates were, because one of the biggest things that is a contributor to like youth delinquency is like unsupervision by parents. And usually this has to happen for quite a while, but when kids are suddenly given like a ton more freedom because they're like, man, I don't even have to be in class, holy shit, like I'm good to go, let's go do some stuff, because they like suddenly have all this free time and like all this pent up energy. Because like it's not only that like your parents are gone for the day, it's like when your parents come home they're tired, but you have not been out all day and you are pent up, you haven't had recess, you haven't had lunch, you haven't played with your friends, you have tons of pent up energy, like you have no idea what to do with. I'm super interested to see like if like youth crime or youth delinquency like increased over the last couple of years. 'Cause I think like, yeah, I think that would be super interesting, like just with kids being on their own so much more and having that like freedom from school and like not having to attend or be in those classes. If it like significantly contribute to like, because I know my mom even like she's like, you know, she's had teachers who like, she's like, how do I get, like teachers have come to her because she's a principal now, she was a teacher for a long time, but she was a principal, and she had teachers come to her and be like, how do I get students to attend class, because she's like, I have like 5 or 10 students who just won't check onto Zoom and like just won't join the class. And like they, like I can't get them to, like their parents are probably working, or their parents might not even know how to. We have a high immigrant and refugee population where I am, and my mom works with a lot of those families. Your parents don't even know how to get your kids online. I remember my mom came home and told me a story one day where she spent 3 hours on a phone with like I think it was a 7-year-old girl, trying to set her up on the iPad. Like, cause again, like I said earlier, they sent some of these kids home with iPads because they had zero technology. I think she was like an immigrant or a refugee family. I can't remember. So her parents didn't speak any English, and she barely spoke English. And my mom had enough of the language that she could like help her through the phone, and was like calling her through the phone for 3 hours trying to get her like set up to be able to like attend her Zoom classes. And like it took her like an hour just to like get this kid on the Wi-Fi at her house. And it was like, shit, like how many kids out there who had that, like who like just couldn't even like attend their like non in like their digital classes, and like how much did that affect them too in the long run. So it was a bit of a long
Yeah,
rant.
I think not having the ability to be in person learning
Mm-hmm.
definitely affected students in a not too great way. And I only have a very limited data scope to go off of. Like, I have a cousin who's an educator, one of my best friends is an educator,
Mm-hmm.
and I have another relative who's also an educator. So I have two family members and a best friend. I hear from their experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it was much more difficult to come up with lesson plans, much more difficult to like keep a command over the classroom, because like, right, normally if you're like, oh Johnny, you know, you're speaking, you're talking too much, I'm
Yeah.
here to like, you can be like, Johnny, be quiet, or you're going to the principal's office. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a disciplinary action that's actionable within a scope that has some sort of authoritative weight to it. But like, if I'm a kid and I'm in my room, what are you gonna do? Mute me? Like, you
Yeah.
can mute me, but I'm
Well,
still
not
gonna be a
even that. The
clown.
kids themselves will have like their cameras off and they're on mute.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
I don't know if
Exactly,
you're
right?
there. Yeah,
What are you
exactly.
gonna how what are you gonna do? Give me a bad grade? Well, I'm not learning anyway because I'm not even
Yeah.
there in person, so it doesn't even matter.
And at least for like older students, like high school, and like for me, I'm in university, like there was like incentive to like participate in class because your grades matter at that point. If you're like an 8-year old who's in grade 3 and your teacher's telling you to turn your camera on, like what incentive is there at that point? You're like, I'm sitting in front of my TV playing video games right now, okay? I just have to turn
Yeah.
this on so my parents don't get a call that I skipped class.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
that's going back to like the parents that have to work, so they're like, all they did was tell me to log in.
Yeah.
They didn't say I couldn't play video
They
games.
couldn't say I couldn't be doing other things. Like, how are you gonna know? What are you gonna tell? Like, you can't send me to the principal's office. Like, even if I'm sitting here playing video games on the Zoom call, what are you gonna do? You like, there was no. It was so hard to like keep a command, like you said, like keep a command over students. I know, like my obviously my mom's in the education system, but I also have a lot of other family who's like in that system. And yeah, it can be so hard to like just get kids to pay attention, especially on like. And I think this is like kind of going back to like my whole thing of like face to face. It wasn't only important to like have that face to face interaction for like older people, like for like our mental health, but for like kids, so much of the learning from like kindergarten to about grade 3, so much of your learning is social learning and like interactive based learning that it's really hard to learn anything over a Zoom call. Like think about kindergarten. What do you learn in kindergarten? You have like things like nap time, you have your centers where you would go play with toys and stuff like that. And not all of that, like none of that is just for like funsies. Like there's a reason that we have like kids play like that, because like things like house center between kids can really help with like socialization skills. Nap time often is about like self-regulation, so having kids calm down in the middle of the day, have them like regulate themselves to like calm down, to like, completely soothe out. When you're not having those things on a Zoom call, like kids don't have centers, kids don't have nap time, like these kids aren't learning like some of the really fundamental things in kindergarten to grade 3 when you're on Zoom versus when you're in person. I think that's like something that I can't even imagine like early education teachers, like, because at least with high school, like you can still send assignments out, you can still give a lecture, you can still like, it's a little bit easier. I still think it was really hard, obviously, but for like people who taught like kindergarten to grade 3, I can't imagine what you were trying to do at those points, because it's like, um I can't imagine what it was like to like try to teach those kids anything, because so much of like your actual learning is supposed to be interactive and social based, and you can't do any of that online. So like how do you make a lesson plan for that now all of a sudden, right?
Exactly. And you have to be effective at it too. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything, and there's no way to test it either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, until it's like everybody had to learn as they were going, and then realize all the difficulties that are associated with a learn as you go approach, and that there needs to be some sort of like a beta testing phase
Mm-hmm.
to there. We saw it in a smaller scale with the university, but again, like being a university student, you're more incentivized to attend remotely because you're either paying or your parents are. And if you're paying out of your own pocket, you're probably way more invested because
Yeah.
you're like, hey, like I'm actually investing my own
Mm-hmm.
resources to be here. So like I'm gonna show up, and there's the adage of like C's get degrees, but typically, if you're not just coming from a position of privilege, you're more likely going to be like, well, if I can get at least a B, then I'm going to shoot for it. Like I
Yeah.
want to,
There was still
I
an
want to put,
incentive to work hard.
yeah, right. It's in that it's you get different types of honors and perks and privileges that come along with having a decent GPA. And granted, there's sometimes you just can't get over the hump of a really difficult course because those exist.
Yeah.
But like I've found that on whole, like people who are at college or university tend to be more motivated than required learning. If they required everybody to go to college or university, you'd probably reach the same levels of uninterest and apathy because they have to be there instead of wanting to be there.
Yeah.
Except for there are those cultural, like you grow up in a household where your parents are like, you either get a job or you go to school. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's either or. Like
Yeah.
you're either working or you're studying. Which
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think most families I know are like that. Like, so kids who either took like a gap year, my friend took a gap year during COVID, and she worked for a bit of it, but luckily her parents actually, like, she worked from throughout most of it, one job, and then she actually took some time off because I think like COVID like did her in, like there was just nothing to do, and then she like had stopped school at that point because she finished her certificate, and then she like didn't like her job anymore, so she stopped that, so she took her year off during like the second year of COVID, I think like 2020 or 2021, I can't remember. But she was off for about a year. And then she like felt after, she was like, oh my God, I wish I had like continued to do something, because she's like, I wasted like a whole year on a year that I like couldn't do anything. Like she's like, if this had been any other time in my life, I probably would have traveled. I would have gone out and done things. I would have like spent that year doing something that I wanted to, because I finally took time off of school and work. And she's like, instead, I spent the whole time pretty much like not doing anything, because like we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't do anything. So yeah, that was one of those things. But I think any of my other friends, it was always like, yeah, you're either working or you're going to school. I know that's like pretty much like for my parents, like what it kind of is like if I hadn't gone to school, it would have like definitely been like I would have had to been working. They probably wouldn't have had me pay rent, but like they definitely would have want me doing something. I couldn't just sit at home and do nothing. Which I think is probably a good rule for most kids, because I think if you like, especially after high school, if you take a gap year where you do nothing, the motivation to start doing something again is so immense because you're like, fuck, I actually have to like go back into something, and that's really hard to do if you take a gap year right after high school. I don't suggest it. I didn't do it, but I know people who did, and that was the feeling that I got from them.
Yeah. I like, well, I had gap years because I went to I started community college at like right after high school, and then I wasn't interested. So after like one summer semester, I just didn't go back and just ended up being a wage earner for a while until I changed my mind. And um, after that point, I was pretty invested because I decided for me that was what I wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked really hard at it. And I felt like I got that feeling from a lot of people, but one of the things that, it's you also took that experience away from people as well. The, the university years of my life were some of the most amazing because of all of the people that I met and the environment that I was in, and people didn't even have that environment really
Mm-hmm.
for the last 2 years. That's
Yeah.
you, a lot of people like meet the love of their life in, if such a person exists, like at university and at college.
Yeah.
And like, how do you do, like, what happens at that point? Do you see each other on like on a Zoom call, like in a lecture Zoom, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, she cute or he cute, and then be like,
Try to shoot your
what's
shot in the
your
DMs.
yeah, let me shoot you a chat in the DMs. Like, is that how it worked? Was that how classroom hookups happened now? Because you couldn't sit next to the person, you were just like, yeah, like they're cute. Let me get at them. Let me see if they let me get at them.
Yeah. I can't. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but I know for me, like this is my first semester even back. So I'm like, I last semester I probably could have had classes in person, but it was just so happened that the classes I took last semester, none of them were offered in person, so I was taking still everything online. So this is my first semester actually back in a lecture hall, like back at my school campus, and it felt so weird because I left university at the beginning of COVID, being in like my end of second year ish, and I felt like I was still like the baby of the university, and like everyone was older than me in my class. All of my it I also really screwed up because all of the friends that I made in my first year of university were older than me by like a year or two. So I like came back after COVID, having been the baby of the school before. Suddenly I'm like going into my classes, everyone is younger than me. I'm like, oh my god, these like are children next to me. So I feel super old all the time. All of the people that I met in like that first 2 years of university have now graduated because everyone's older than me. So I'm like, I feel like I'm almost restarting like university, not in the sense of schooling, but in sense of like trying to like make connections in classes because I was like, I have to like restart because all of my friends graduated and I didn't spend the last 2 years making friends because everything's online. You can't. Like usually like the way you make friends in a university class is like you go sit down in your lecture hall or you sit down in your like small classes and you'll like talk to the people next to you and then you get like their messages and you talk about class stuff and like you slowly build those friendships. But like I had none of that over the last 2 years. So everyone that I had known before graduated. Anyone I would have met in those 2 years, I couldn't. So like now I'm like back in university and I'm like I'm so lonely. And I like feel like the like the whole like you were saying that experience of like meeting people and like meeting people that you might date or even just meeting friends, like that's such a fun part of university is meeting new people. And I never was like the type who liked meeting new people. And then when I got into university, I really enjoyed it because I thought it was so fun to meet all these different people who are like in the same stage of life who like really, you know, because the people in high school you're thrown into high school with like people like every type of person. Whereas when you're in university, you're with a bunch of other people who are passionate, who are driven, like who are doing things that they want to do. And so people are so interesting in university. And I feel like so many people, especially like if you went like people I met who were in first year when they got into university and like during Zoom, I can't imagine what that would be like to like have your first semester of university online and miss all those fun experiences.
Yeah, and then it's like you have, especially if it was like your first or second year, um, imagine being like your first 2 years are remote learning. So like all these people, how that weird, it's almost like meeting someone like from online,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's like I know all of these people, but it's super awkward because now we're all in the same place. And it's like, yeah, like we've hung out in chat in classroom and like we've
Yeah.
Discord called, but now like we see each other in this physical space and
Mm-hmm.
we had no room for this dynamic to unfold in its natural setting. So let's all be awkward together and very weird about it. Like, I wonder if things are just normal, or if like people did experience that when they were there. Like you went, like you said, that's it's lonely, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's there was this time where all those things that a typical college student should experience just kind of fell by the wayside. Like you're missing a pretty significant
Mm-hmm.
portion of that college life, and not because like you opted out, which people do, is because like you were told you can't, and
Yeah.
we're making it impossible for you to do so.
Oh, the other big one going with that, right before people go into university, I know people who miss their like high school graduation, like their prom and their grad. And I was like, oh damn, that would suck because like some people miss like their university grad, but university grad you like walk across the stage and get your certificate and it's cool. But university, like your prom is such a big fun thing, especially like you know, as your last big blow with like the people that you grew up with. I felt so bad because I actually had like two or three people that I knew who graduated in the years of like COVID, and they all missed their grad. And like I know so many people who had like bought their dresses right before, and then everything shut down, and like they missed their grad. They had their dresses, they had everything ready, and like I was like, damn, that's gotta suck. Like you like finish high school. You miss your prom, you start university, and it doesn't feel like university because everything's online, so you don't even get to make new friends at university. Like, I was like, damn, that would suck so hard.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. What did it feel like to graduate and then not have like all those quit like your teen movie experience never occurred
Yeah, right? You're
because
like
it
big
wasn't.
like oh my god, like can you imagine like everyone dreams of like especially when you're young, you everyone gets really excited for that idea. I actually almost skipped my grad cuz I was that kid, but I had friends who made me go. So that's a whole other thing. But I think most people like have this like big hyped up thing of like, "Oh my god, prom's going to be so fun. We're going to go. We're going to have like fun. We're going to dance." Like it's a big party. Like it is like your back like last big blow with your friends, and like to miss that like such an like you know an epic moment and like most people like everyone has in their life like most people have like some type of grad situation that they like super enjoy and will remember for the rest of your life like everyone remembers their high school prom I think at least somewhat like your especially your last year prom and I think it's like damn to like miss out on such a big event I think like that's so sad and like I don't think that would affect your mental health in like the long run but I think for like kids at that time like to miss like your last year of like your high school to have it all like your last year of high school be online and to miss your grad I can't imagine that would do like to your mental health to have to be away from your friends miss your grad and now you feel like you know you've missed this big step in life and like how that would make you feel even if it wasn't like you know it doesn't throw you into depression but it would make you feel like just kind of shitty and it wouldn't be you know great I was Metamodel's here. I was dating someone who was graduating right when COVID dropped. The disappointment was thick in the air around campus. Oh damn. Yeah, I can't. Oh god, it's gotta suck.
Oh, that does.
Sigh.
That sucks.
It's just oh the poor kids, the poor children. And will no one think of the children? Uh, yeah. But yeah, yeah. I think so many life events, like that's the thing is like it wasn't just like the really big mental health like tolls that people took. I think it was all the little things that people like took on of like missing big moments like grad or like people who had their wedding planned out and now everything about your wedding got like you were planning to get married in like 4 months. Like let's say you planned to like get married in June and you were like ready for it and all of a sudden in March everything shuts down and now your wedding is canceled. Like you were really excited for that. Like that's a big thing for people, right? To like get married and you have to like stop you have to shut down your wedding. Like that would damn. Especially for Indian people I know. I don't know if you've ever seen an Indian wedding. Indian weddings are big. They go hard. They're really expensive. They're huge. And people I know who had to cancel like their weddings were like super disappointed because like you put a lot of effort into planning those type of weddings. Like the Indian weddings are crazy. I think missing life events like that I think is like really hard for people. And like at least with weddings, you know you're gonna be able to replan it. But I think like it's one of those things that you never want to like have to cancel a wedding. You never want to feel like that's something you super look up forward to, and having to like deter for like 2 years I think is like pretty shitty. Um, And again, like none of this is to say for like anyone chat. Like this is none of this like that we're talking about is like to say that we shouldn't have like taken care of COVID and that we should have just let people do what they want. It's more like just thinking about all the other stuff that happened that took a toll on people in a way that was like like hard or like mentally stressing or at the more extreme ends like things that did like really big damage on people's mental health.
Yeah, and that's definitely like that's the whole point of this conversation is because I think that the measured approach that we took in trying to contain was what was supposed to have been done, right? Because we can't discount the severity and the nobility, if that's a word, of the situation because it was something that we hadn't experienced for at least a century, or at least the fear of which for a century. So naturally, the idea would be to mitigate as much as possible. But there are lasting effects now that we really don't see or understand, and that's what I'm really curious about. Is like now that we kind of see that there's a light at the other end of the tunnel, and it's not just like to quote Metallica, like a freight train coming our way, right? Like is there's some sort of sense of genuine hope for a new tomorrow that's being aside from things that are going on in Eastern Europe, which we'll shelve that for now.
Yeah.
That's a whole different situation. But barring world events, we're seeing that we're increasingly approaching a situation where we might be able to live with this thing now. And but for 2 years we were told how to live, where we could go while we were like, imagine being a kid and that's your lesson is like when you're a kid you're waiting to be an adult because I can finally do everything that I want to do. I can eat ice cream for breakfast. I can stay up as late as I want and nobody's going to tell me what to do because I can tell myself what to do. And then you become an adult and now you have this big brother, whatever, in the form of government and saying, well, actually, because you're an adult, that's exactly why you need to be told what to do. You should,
Yeah.
you are not allowed any freedom. And, yeah, it's,
I
there's a lot of things that occurred.
I mean, yeah, even going back to, sorry, just to not to cut you off, but with the university thing, I remember one of the funnest parts of university for me and my friend. So for me, I mean, I like my parents are pretty like relaxed and chill, but even for me going into university, that idea of like that little bit of freedom, like you get to go off on your own every day, you're going like to campus, you're like taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your parents treat you a lot differently when you're in high school, like university versus high school. And so you have like a totally different relationship with life and taking care of yourself. And like I have a friend whose family was super strict, and now she like had a ton of freedom going into university because she finally like she would like drive to school every day. She's spent the 8 hours at school, but she was like she didn't have to tell her parents her schedule. Like your parents never know your schedule in university. Your schedule is different every semester. Your parents don't keep track of it anymore. So she could just be like, oh, I'm in class till like 6 o'clock tonight, but she could actually like go out and do things finally. So like for a lot of kids who are like maybe from really strict households or even for me like even if you're not from a strict household, something about university gives you such like a new outlook on life in terms of being an adult and coming into your own person as an adult and like using university or like college as like a means to get there and feeling like you're suddenly out on your own. Like I think a lot of kids who probably did like their first couple semesters of university online, I think probably missed a little bit of that experience of like finally getting to be out there on their own, and now they're probably experiencing it a little bit now, but I don't know if it's that same nostalgic feeling because all of a sudden you've still been in university for 2 years, now you're just doing it like I don't know if it's that same transition, whereas like going from high school where you're like constantly monitored to like holy shit, I am free in university, like I am taking care of my own shit, I'm doing what I want, like you finally get to like enjoy your own life a little bit more and like have that freedom. I feel like a lot of kids probably like not only missed on their end of high school but missed out on their early university years or early university experiences, because there was none of, there were none like everything was online, right?
Yeah. Oh, online life. How was that for you? How was just living your entire existence online? How was it being in your own experience, just like digital code for like 2 years?
It was a little demotivating. I actually probably struggled way harder than I should have. but it was already because I was really demotivated. Like I switched degrees during the pandemic because I finally actually came into realizing what I really was passionate about in life. So it was like one good thing about the pandemic is I think it finally brought me around to what I really was passionate about, which was kind of nice. I think I probably would have gotten there anyway, but I think like, maybe having more time to reflect on what I was doing probably helped. I was doing a chemistry degree, so I was about 3 years into a chemistry degree at that point when I switched. But I was already super by the end of like that 3 years. It was like second semester. I was like in the pandemic, and my grades started to slip. I was so demotivated already from not liking my degree, and then everything went online, and I was like even more demotivated because the only thing at that point that I was enjoying was doing like labs, which are like an in-person thing, and all of a sudden labs weren't happening because all your labs were now online. So it's like I'm doing my lab in a computer program, not with like actual chemistry bottles and like doing actual like experimentation in a lab. I'm like doing everything online. So I was like double demotivated because the one thing I liked about my classes was like gone. Everything was online. I didn't get to have the connection with my friends. Like the few like I had some friends in those classes, so like I didn't get to see them anymore. So there was like it was just really hard because then you also had to like do everything on your own. Like you had to like your teachers would just like post your lectures weekly. You had to go watch them, take all your own notes. You couldn't like interact with people. Like it was just, I think there's so many things that just made me like super demotivated with school. And I know that happened for a lot of other people. One weird thing that I missed. So our school, I love our school. We get puppy therapy at our school, at our university. So during final exam season, they bring dogs to the school campus and you can like sign up for a half an hour time slot to go play with puppies or play with dogs for half an hour to de-stress during your exam period. And we couldn't do that anymore. And so many people were so upset that like, oh my God, I don't get my puppy therapy during final season. So that
Puppy
was super sad.
therapy.
We got puppy. Yeah, our school does puppy therapy.
I
And
remember, not from your school, but yes, go ahead.
yeah, that was like such a thing. I was like, oh my God, I don't get puppy therapy during finals. Yeah, I think towards the end of like after about a year doing school in the pandemic and doing school online, it got better. But I had also like after about a year, I switched career paths, so I was super remotivated. And I was able to like read all my stuff a little bit easier. I was motivated to watch lectures. I was motivated to engage with the course content, even despite being online. But I think I was lucky in that way. I don't know if everyone probably had that second hit, that second wind. So I think I just got lucky with that. But other than that, there's definitely grades definitely shot up among course averages. Because I know so many people who, with online classes, it meant online exams, which means that no one's watching you while you're taking exams. So, like, I remember there was classes, like, I took organic chem the semester before everything went online, and our class average was, I think, like, 62%. And the next semester, the organic chem class was online, and the next semester, that organic chem class had an 86% average. That organic chem class never had above a 65% average. So everyone knew, but no one could prove it that everyone cheated, but everyone knew they cheated because like there was no way that the class average was that high. So I think that was the other thing. I think a lot of people were like motivated to cheat or like just like, because it was also that thing of like you knew everyone else was cheating, so you didn't want to get screwed over because the grades were so high. So you like everyone cheated because they knew everyone else was cheating. So there definitely was a lot of that. So, we're gonna have doctors in 5 years that are like, fuck, I don't remember anything. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
shit.
But I mean, why not? Because if all that matters is just the percentile on the test you're taking,
Mm-hmm.
why not use every resource at your disposal now that it's at your fingertips? And
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
it's cheating, but like, why not? Why
Hey
not
man, if I
just
can
see?
bump my GPA like a couple percent over this pandemic, you know what I mean? Like I can go
Yeah.
back and slack off a little bit. Like I think that was a lot of the mentality too, is like I just need to bump my GPA. So like I'm
Yeah.
gonna do
And
it.
then you have this kind of like this double-bladed argument, right? Double-edged
Mm-hmm.
argument where it's like, well, would you rather that we just sucked and that like we didn't put any effort in and the percentile actually goes down because we don't care, or we see an opportunity and everybody's like performing better, but through nefarious means. Well, it's like
Yeah.
even if they're just using Google for information or for like using it for calculations, especially with complex variables,
Yeah.
like isn't it actually a better thing that people who attend here are doing better on average than they used to be?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, yes, but not if they're cheating. Well, it's like, well, you can't have both,
You
right?
can't have
It's
both. Yeah. No, it was like I don't think Because most of our teachers, like, I don't think I ever had a teacher who had to have like a screen monitoring thing on where you had to like turn your screen, like you had to share your screen with a teacher. It was always usually like if a teacher did do monitoring, it was like through a webcam, like like how I look now. So like you had to point it down slightly at your desk, but just enough that they could see your head and like in the screen. So like if you had stuff like on the side of your desk, if you had stuff on the wall behind you, if you had stuff beside you or under you, like it was so easy to get away with stuff because like they can't really see what you're looking at. They can't see what you're doing. So I saw a lot of people where I'm like, I could look in the Zoom screen and I was like, I know that kid's cheating, but that teacher probably has no idea because like I don't think like well teachers probably do think of it, but I think it's so hard to prove too. Is like even if you call a kid out, it's like oh you're cheating. It's like and that kid just like quickly slides something off his lap and he's like what are you talking about and then like shows his camera. It's like you have no way of proving that. I think a lot of teachers probably just like did not engage in like trying to like catch cheating because it was just there was no good way to do it, right? So
Not without being present, right? You need a
yeah,
proctor.
exactly. Yeah,
And even proctors don't catch everything.
yeah, yeah. Like for our classes, we have like 5 or 6 TAs in a big lecture, but with like 200 kids on a Zoom call, over 200 kids on a Zoom call, and then there's like 4 TAs and a teacher. You're watching like 20 kids per person. That's still too many people to watch. There's no way you're gonna catch everything. And again, like even if you catch something, did you actually? Because like, can you prove it? It's like okay, like how do you know I'm cheating? Like what the hell?
I saw the answers in your coffee cup. Empty it out. It's you have to have such definitive proof.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like,
Like unless you have like full proof that the kid did something, like you screenshot them looking at their phone, like there ain't no
yes,
way that you're like being able to like get a kid on that, right?
yeah. But I mean, but at the same time, I feel like, even if people were kind of using the internet and whatever tools they had to boost their grade up by other means. I don't think that's necessarily bad that they're also taking an interest, like more of an interest in their work because they're like, well, now that I can do better on my test, I will. And even if it's coming from of them being like, oh well, like I wouldn't normally do this well, that they're actually putting in an extra effort, even if it's for convenience or because it makes it easier. And as long as they're smart enough that if they're borrowing information, that it's not full on plagiarization, that they actually know how to reword,
Yeah.
paraphrase, and cite. Like if I see them making that effort now that they don't have to memorize, I'm like, okay, like yeah, if you word for word and you don't say, I'm gonna bang you up on this score right here. And I'm gonna say no way, this is wrong. But if I see that they like actually got it,
Yeah.
they paraphrase, they credited like this is not my work, but these are my thoughts and this is the source. Like okay, like great, you're actually you're
You're
putting
learning
more
something.
work
Yeah.
in.
Actually, this is like one thing I will say that I think the pandemic really gave us better because I always say that I think we talked about this a little while ago that like education hasn't caught up with like technology. So a lot of times we're still getting kids to memorize things. Like a lot of my like math courses or physics courses or chem courses, like it was so much memorization, but it's like what's the point? Like all of these things are at our like why am I memorizing 8 different formulas or 8 different molecule structures when in reality like these days I don't have to look through a textbook to find these things. If I'm in a chemistry lab, we can look these things up at the tip of our fingers. What should be really like we should be focusing on is like having kids like learn how to learn and like utilize the tools around them to do better. And education hasn't gotten there, but I think the pandemic pushed us a little bit more to it. So I noticed a lot of my teachers will be like, okay, we're going to make this exam open book. And they might have made like the test a little bit shorter so you had less time because it was open book. So like they didn't want kids like spending like 5 minutes per question, like just looking through every page of notes. But what it meant is like you had to take like very practical notes, which meant like maybe you're like noting like little things that would help you like jog your memory because you could look back at your notes. So now you're learning to like, have like little tidbits of information that would like jog your memory enough to be like, oh, I can write it now like a good paragraph for the censor, right? Because you had like the little bit of notes. So I think I liked that a lot of teachers switched to open book because they knew kids were going to cheat anyway. But then if they made it open book, it meant that the kids that had access to the resources that they needed, they weren't cheating by using Google. It was like, here's the resources. You can use anything you like used in this class, any of the lecture notes, the textbook, any notes you've made. Like that's all fair game. But like now you have to utilize that to like answer the questions on the test. Or they like a lot of teachers would be like, okay, you have all the information. We're going to give you all the passages. You're going to be able to access everything. But now the questions are going to be more based on like, so what did you learn from like this? Not just like, don't just repeat back to me. Don't tell me like the name of this theorist or tell me the like year which they wrote their paper. Tell me what was like, what was that paper trying to prove? Like, what do you think the outcome of that paper? Like, right? Like, what did you get from this? So like a lot of the stuff became more like engaging with the material. And I thought that was really good. I think a lot of teachers switched to that mode of learning, and that was really good. Also, I have to point out Stephen Curry simp, my number one hater is here. Mental health doesn't exist. Maybe if you don't have a brain like you, but you know, that's a you problem. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so we have the potential not just for like discussing, the net negatives that have occurred from things, but there's positives that I'm sure people felt great, by actually score. Because I could imagine myself in a situation where I normally would score shit on a test, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that the resources are available to me and it's like freely available, I'm seeing my own marked improvement. So I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
like, despite not being able to see other people, that I have an increased sense of worth and value of self because now I'm doing better than I used to. And right, that's not going
Mm-hmm.
to be universal across the board for everyone, but there could be isolated examples or maybe
I mean,
general
for me, that was
examples.
definitely true. Like I said, I switched programs, so that one thing that motivated me. But I also was like, A, really engaged with the material, but B, because my teachers set up the classes to be that way, I found I was able to do way better because like having the access, I have terrible memorization skills. So when it comes to like memorizing things for a test, I'm really bad. But when my teacher said like, we're going to give you all the access to material, I did so good because all I needed was like my little notes to be able to like kind of jog my memory and like or like just have like the notes open just to remember theorists' names or like spelling, and I didn't have to worry about little details. What I could like focus on was like what was their broader themes, what was the bigger thing they were trying to focus on, and it was so much easier. And I did really well in all my classes because like I actually had the ability to do really well in my classes because it wasn't just all standard memorization for a test. Like, hey, memorize this theorist and what was his paper and what year did he publish it. It wasn't like that type of test anymore. And I was like super. I did end up doing super well, and I think it did boost my confidence because like I've had a 4.0 GPA like my last 4 semesters now, and it's like damn, like and that wasn't just because like and like yeah, that was a lot because my teachers like formatted the class in a way that was like really conducive to learning.
Yeah, but this is also so this is one of the things that I was getting back like when we were discussing education last time is what happens when you actually put the tools into the learner's hands like
Yeah.
you give them the ability to like there's always like my approach I spoke with a friend about this is that I'm not in education because I prefer like a very like ultra Socratic. I want to be like walking around in courtyards with
A
people
giga
and
brain.
just and yeah, just like exploring questions and possibilities. But there would never be any type of like written or multiple choice test part of it. It would just be like the entire discussion, and you can take notes. We can discuss these things further, and we're going to try to get at the core. Like that's the type of like a facet of education that I would like to facilitate,
Mm-hmm.
where I don't have to grade papers, I don't have to do research, I don't want to be tethered down. I just want to engage minds who want to learn, but
Yeah.
be able to teach them like like through traditional like chalkboard and stuff like that if they want to, or whatever like be able to be like, these are the tools that are available to you. First, I want to see what you do with these tools on your own,
Mm-hmm.
and if you come to the answer, and if you do, and if you do it in a novel way, I'm really interested. But then, like after you fiddle around with it, then I'll show you the whatever is the proper method of the time,
Like now let's
and
have
then
a
that's
real conversation about like what to do here.
yeah, yeah, and it's like, well, it's like now these tools are yours. You messed around with them on your own. Now you know how it is that they can be utilized to their fullest extent. Go use them. Show me what you can do. And that's one thing that I'd appreciate about people like actually performing better. And yeah, some of it's copy pasta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Google answer copy pasta and
Yeah.
easy, like that's done. But some of that is actually engaging you. And I think that getting people more engaged is like you're an example that it's a positive. It's better performance,
Mm-hmm.
better sense of self-worth, more
Mm-hmm.
like these are things that are positive for all of the things that we've been dealing with for over the past 2 years. And those are all like that's all why I'm asked like I put this question out there is because I want to know like everything
Mm-hmm.
that people have experienced, and that's one. And it looks like you have some stuff going on in chat, so I'll let you get to it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say kind of back to that quickly before I go to the comments is I've had teachers during the pandemic or like we have like you have your main prof during like your lecture time, like you have your hour or two lecture for the class. But then sometimes you'll have like classes that are like small groups from the lecture where you're like put into small groups and you have like a class per week where you just work in your small group with like a TA, like a teacher's assistant. So I have one of those right now. I've had teacher's assistants during this pandemic who will basically just take the notes from the teacher, condense them, and re-go over them during tutorials. And that's not really like helpful. It's just like, okay, you're reviewing the content. That's good. But I have a teacher right now who's like my philosophy TA, and he is brilliant. He's great. Like he set up like games to play. He sets up every class starts open like it's philosophy class. He'll always give us a philosophy question so the class can discuss with him. You know, what do you guys think of this? Like, how do you approach a question like this in philosophy, or like it's a morality class. So like he's like, what do you think is like the moral answer here? Like, how should we go about this? And this week, like he set it up like he's like there's gonna be a debate. Like we're gonna have a proper debate set up. Like I want you guys to like engage with each other. So he's been really good about having us interact with each other, especially just being like the first semester back in university. I think it's really cool. Like some TAs, like, you know, it can be hard as a TA to work with kids online. But I've had TAs who like didn't do much more than just like, you know, go over the material that we had in class. But then I've had TAs like this who like were really engaged in trying to get us to like converse with each other and work with each other and like be involved in the discussion and be involved in like the conversations. And I think that's like way better for students to like learn things. But yeah, I'll go to some of the comments here. Stephen Curry simp, if I don't have a brain, how was I brainwashed from a young age? I Were you in a cult? Okay. Cloud Van, welcome back. We say mental health, but it's generally a combination of physical and emotional health. Peeps can usually recognize unhealthy practices in others, so they're generally less good at helping. Um, yeah, I would say so, but I think that with mental health, I think we talk about like mental, like some of the disorders and like syndromes that you can end up with, like people who ended up slipping into depression or who ended up furthering their anxiety. Addictions are part of like mental health. I think in the general sense, we talk about like mental and physical, or physical and emotional health. I think on like a day to day basis, that probably makes up a lot of our our mental health. But I think there are like grander things to talk about that actually are to do with mental health. Sorry, not trying to interrupt the larger conversation. I'm rather chatty. No, we love it. I mean, honestly, like I said, I always say this, like, join my Discord. If you ever want to ask me questions, if you ever just want to have a conversation, I am always open to having conversations with like anyone. You can jump in my Discord. If you like type questions in there, I'll respond. If you ever want to come on stream and chat, we can always set that up. Like these are things I will do. Like that's why I set up this whole stream. Like I wanted to engage with people. So whatever questions or comments you have, feel free to leave them in the chat. Feel free to leave them in my Discord. Like it's all good. Interesting on the teacher. There's emphasis on moral answers. Hope he covers pragmatic and answers as well. The two are linked, but don't always coincide. Yeah, that's definitely something we like look at in class. It's a philosophy class, so it's talking about like moral and legal questions. So like kind of like that idea of like the moral answer versus the legal answer. Like what do we actually do? Is like pretty much the general basis of that class. Most of the people I work with as a friend use mental health, but don't have any of the more serious problems. They're more struggling with emotional trauma. It's good to distinguish. Yeah, I think the idea is not that like either of these things is like separate, like, oh, it's just emotional trauma. I think all of these things are really interlinked, and I think we're too quick to like try to like put things into categories. And I think that's probably not the best way to look at these things. I talked about this on stream a couple weeks ago, how like so many times like different parts of our health are interconnected. So we talk about mental health being really harmful, but how does mental health affect our physical health, or how does our physical health affect our mental health? I don't think these things are ever just like one category, like, oh, you're just emotionally hurt. I think those things, like being emotionally hurt, can also mean that you're hurt in like multiple other ways, or like being physically hurt might mean that you're also hurt in like other ways. And I think that I think trying to categorize things too much as like just this or just that can also be like a bad way to like go about these issues. I try to categorize one person's friends can help, two persons that needs therapists now. Yeah, that's fair. There's definitely situations like that where like there's people who you can probably just like be a support for, and there's people who have like more serious issues that need to go to like a more someone who's more of a specialist. But I also am one of those people who advocate for everyone to go to therapy once in a while, just because I think it's good for everyone to have like an outlet or like someone who can like help them in a more professional sense, if you have the means to, of course. Yeah, Sin, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that you touched down on is what we talked about last time, is like this over specialization of like
Mm-hmm.
our health,
Yeah.
and the need for a holistic approach to present itself, because we're like, oh, it's about your dental health, oh, it's about your physical health, oh, it's about your mental health. These are all your health.
Yeah.
These what happens if even if you we can even if we can definitively prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that you are just the synapses firing off in your brain and that's all it is, to
Mm-hmm.
oversimplify, what goes on in there affects everything. Everything that's happening within you is one whole unit, and it's easier to examine if you separate and compartmentalize. But you still have to take a step back and be like, how does this connect to the bigger picture?
Mm-hmm.
And that we stigmatize the idea of, to say that someone's taking a mental health day. Like I think that it doesn't even need. It's like I think that taking a mental health day, it can just be taking a personal health day because
Mm-hmm.
you are taking care of, you are a person who needs to not only be cared for in some regard, like as in the community, like the community cares for each other in different ways by ensuring that we all have energy and going to work and houses are built, blah blah blah. But like also that you have to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You need time to rest. You need time to reflect. You need time to plan and to think about things. Like these are all things that your mind is thinking always and ever. And to be like, that's a bad thing. Like that you being in your best effort to put your best foot forward, to be refreshed enough to make fewer mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
because human error is human error. It exists.
Mm-hmm.
But the more worn out you are, the higher that probability for error. And it doesn't even need to be, you can be physically well rested, but you're just mentally drained, right?
Yeah,
Like your brain power is
absolutely.
at a minimum, so you're messing up. You're just like, you could be a doctor, right? If you are mentally drained but otherwise physically well, and you're like a surgeon, I would be like, so doc, you look worse for wear. Yeah, I'm just
Might not want
kind
to do
of
that brain surgery today.
kind of drained right now, and I'm your patient. Yeah, let's get you in anesthesia. And like, doctor, I can't even understand what you're saying. Your words aren't connecting with what you're, right. It's like, I don't want you to work on me. I'm sure you're a top surgeon and every other surgery's gone well, but if this is your current state,
Mm-hmm.
can you please not cut me up? i would
Yeah, for
i would
sure.
like you to take some, if I can put it off. I
Yeah,
would rather wait.
yeah, for
If I
sure.
can't, then please find somebody else who can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, going back to Clouded Ben's comments here, each health needs to be addressed separately. It's a spectrum. Having them all in a bucket together generalizes advice too much. Yeah, I don't think. Sorry, maybe I was unclear. I don't mean to put them all in a bucket, like try to like address them all in one sitting. I think the idea is to like have a more cohesive response to like when people have an issue with their health in one aspect. I think to attack it from like a few different like viewpoints or a few different directions is probably a better way than to like just say like, here's your diagnosis, this is what you have, this is it, this will like cure you or fix you. I don't know if that's necessarily like, the right approach, and I think that's a lot of times in society right now, because we were talking about like the hyper specialization. Like if you're someone who's like a like the like you know, eyes, nose, and or what's it called, the ears, nose, and throat doctor, right? And your person comes in with a sore throat, and you give them like okay, we're gonna give you like a not pain relief, but like a cough syrup type thing to like help with your throat. Well, that person's actual issue might be in their stomach, like they might have like acid reflux or something. But like an eye, nose, or and throat doctor might not know that it starts somewhere else. And obviously that's broad. Like I think an eye, nose, or throat doctor would probably be able to recognize that. But what I'm saying is like I think like sometimes we like focus too much on like this idea of like just attacking like things from one perspective. Like people who have like chronic headaches, it's like okay, there might be something wrong with your brain, or there might be like you're chronically stressed out and you are actually inducing headaches in yourself and having like these intense migraines because of that. So I think like when we say it, like approach these things a little bit more cohesively is probably the better way to go after them, and not just approach it from like this is a physical health issue, this is a mental health issue, this is an emotional health issue. I generally agree with your take days off when drained, always secure yourself and take care of yourself. Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. Here in Canada, we do, at least where some jobs, like I think government jobs and stuff, you can actually get mental health days. Like we get sick days, and we also get, I think there are for a lot of jobs now mental health days that you can take if you need it. And they work just like sick days, but they're for like if you need a mental like day off. I try to differentiate between addiction, hardcore personality disorders, and other conditions that remove agency of individual versus what we have a level of control over. Yeah, I super agree with this. This is actually something they've talked about. Going a little off track here, but this is something they talk about with the recent DSM manuals. There's this idea, a lot of people in the mental health like like the APA and those like psychological communities have an issue with how much we over pathologize different disorders. So like there's things like BPD, like severe personality disorders, which we can like be like these are super detrimental to people's lives. But then we have a bunch of like smaller disorders that like may have like a semi like day to day impact, but they don't really like they're not really that harmful to people's mental health. But we've like given them a disordered name because they're like we call them a disordered behavior. But like a lot of people in the psychological community actually have an issue with that because they're like, are we giving too many things diagnosis? Like, does everything need to be like, does every like daily behaviors need to be diagnosed? Like, should we actually be like diagnosing these things? Are we actually making the problem worse by being telling people that they have a disorder when it's something that might not actually affect their daily life that much, and it's something that they can deal with a little bit easier than like saying like you have a diagnosis, here's your disorder, this is what it causes, and then like either try to like give them some type of pill management or try to like get them into like different type of therapies. It's like this might be something that this person can actually find other ways to deal with, rather than going to like a psychiatrist to like get it diagnosed. So I can definitely agree with that. I mean, talk and listen to whoever you're helping. They're a guide to themselves somewhat, assuming we know what's best in pigeonholing conditions into the cause of a lot of problems. Yeah, yeah, I think that's like, I think I can agree with that, is like every person's going to be different. So like kind of going back to my other example of like if two people walk in with a sore throat, they might have completely different reasons for why they have a sore throat. And I think that's like having that like individualistic response and not just saying like, okay, you both have a sore throat, you're both getting cough medicine, is like the best way to do it. And instead like everyone just we need to like focus on like individual people and how their brain and body works rather than taking like the really, and I know it's a really hard thing to do because like doctors are, they have to see a lot of patients. You can't necessarily go on like really specifically like looking at everyone's like holistic like lifestyle, but there's probably somewhere in the medical system that we could like set up like places where people can go to get like a little bit more of a holistic approach. I'll go for this last comment. One person I met with was hating humanity, identifying more with being an animal. Over 2 years, she's come around and is interacting more happier, and it was more the crowd she was in than anything that was wrong with her. Positive feedback helpful. Yeah, just being in better, healthier groups could be like make the craziest difference. And let's even go back to like everything with COVID. Kind of bringing this back to the thing of like people who during COVID got stuck in a really bad place because they couldn't see their friends, they couldn't see family. They might have gotten stuck around a group that like wasn't healthy for them because they couldn't actually escape it. Like if you had like, or maybe you were stuck with family, maybe that was the problem. It's like you had a really toxic family and that's what you were stuck with. It can put you in a really bad place. And I think like that's super why we saw some like mental health disorders get really bad, is because people were stuck and didn't have an option to get out of that. Sin, if you want to add on to anything there. Sorry, I ranted for
Yeah,
a long time there.
it's okay. I was just letting everything pan out and wanted to make sure that you had addressed all of the wonderful contributions to our conversation tonight. Um, yeah, I mean, there was that comment made by Cloward of a person feeling like an animal, and I think and they probably literally felt that way, that not Cloward but the person they're referring to, or at least closer to animals. But I feel like being in a cage, I probably felt more like an animal than I had ever been before. And I was like, this existence sucks. And not in the sense of like nihilism or like nothing matters, should just like uninstall life exe and hope that there's a reboot or something. Nothing ridiculous like that. But it was definitely sobering to be like, well, this is my life. I'm a prisoner, but without bars. There are imaginary bars. I can leave, but there's the potential for punishment. So I just have to keep to myself and isolate away from everyone else. I was like, this is not a healthy way of living.
Yeah.
Not to be, I don't like being solitary all the time. I enjoy my peace and my downtime, and I need a quiet space for just me on occasion when my body is like, just leave everything right now and disappear for a little while because you need this. So I'm very keen to listen to those cues and take time down as needed. But how like that's why I keep we keep getting back to this too. Is like how was like everybody's experience had to have been different to a degree. I'm sure we shared a lot in common, but like you've experienced all sorts of different things,
Hmm.
but like did you ever have the chance to be able to like get more of that freedom, like because you normally would have went off to college, and I'm going to hazard the guess that you ended up, being at home a lot more than you anticipated in your college life. So
Hmm.
that one point of more freedom from parental control kind of was removed.
Yeah.
um and what type, like, did people fully embrace something else? I want to know about the outliers. Like, did people like really like reject humanity and return to monkey, so to speak?
Return to
You know?
monkey. Um, I think in the first year I struggled a lot because I didn't like being pent up at home. I really struggled like just constantly being at home, constantly like it also really sucked because I'm one of those people who's like if I have work to do and I'm doing something else that's not productive, I'll feel really, really bad about it. So I think that was one of my big issues, especially in the first year where I constantly had work to do and I was not motivated to do it because I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. But I was home all the time, so I had nothing else to do that was productive. And anytime I went to do something else, even if it was something I was enjoying, like if I wanted to go like do some art, like I paint, if it was like I wanted to go do some art, I like couldn't even pick up the paintbrush because I'd actually feel so bad doing art when I knew I had homework to do. But it's like I knew I had more time because I wasn't commuting. I didn't have to go to classes in person. I could watch all my lectures on two times speed, and I could be doing that stuff. But I like didn't want to do that, and then I couldn't let myself do anything else. So I felt super unproductive all the time because I was like constantly in this battle in my own head of like, okay, I need to start my work, but I don't want to do that. So maybe I should just do something else in the meantime because I'm gonna like procrastinate this for another hour anyway. But I'm like, but if I start doing that, then I'll procrastinate more, and it was just like a horrible feedback loop. I threw myself into, which was really really bad, and I think that like took a big toll on my mental health. I think the big switch came when I switched career path or switched my degree paths, obviously. And then I had more time. I was much more invested in the work I was doing, so I was getting on top of my work. I was up to date on anything. I was getting my assignments done on time. I was keeping up with my lectures and my readings, and I was really intrigued by it. It also meant that I finally had time to do things I enjoyed, and I got back into doing things that I enjoyed. So I did Taekwondo for most of my life when I was growing up. I finally got a punching bag over the last 2 years, or sorry, after that last year. I went back to like working on my punching bag and like just being able to like let loose and like hit something was really nice. And taking that time to like engage back in fitness in a really real way. I was also a dancer, so I do a lot of that now still. Even art, like I went back to painting, and that was super fun for me. Like just enjoying doing stuff again while also going to school. I think was like finding the balance for me, and that's when I started to like get my mental health back together a little bit. It didn't completely go back because I think it was still hard being cooped up inside, but I did try to take some of that time that I had now and put it towards something that was like fulfilling. As yeah, Cloward Van said, it seems one of the keys of happiness fulfillment is finding small victories each day, and I think that was definitely the thing of like, or I started cooking. Like I would cook meals. Like I think that first year it was like so hard to get up and like cook a meal for like every meal, and then I like got really into trying to like eat again because I like when I'm stressed I like stop eating. So I was like trying to get back into being physically fit. I was trying to put on muscle weight. And so then I got back into like trying to like make consistent meals. So I was having 3 meals a day. I was trying to eat healthy. Like it was all these like little things that I could do to try to like fulfill, like try to live a fulfilling life. So not just only in school was I doing even better, but like in my entire life I felt like I was doing better because I was actually doing things. Like I was eating healthy. I was doing things I enjoyed. I was passionate about. Like I went back to like just enjoying the little things in my life, and I think that was like super helpful for me. And I know there's probably a lot of people who couldn't find that because I think a lot of people got into a rut during the pandemic. But I think for anyone who did find those little things that they enjoyed, it was really, really nice. I will say, I had friends who also during the pandemic had a really opposite experience. Like the two people who I know in my life who had the most stable mental health until the pandemic, all of a sudden had really. Oh, my brother's asking me if I have corn flour. Um, I had one friend who had he was like top of his class GPA. He partied every weekend. He got like girls all the time. Like he's just one of those guys who like did really well in life, and he's like super driven and stuff too. However, during the pandemic, when he had to stop partying, he stopped hooking up as much because obviously he couldn't meet people as easily. I think he had to start settling with himself a little bit. And for the first year of the pandemic, he like really kind of lost his mind a little bit because he was still doing really well in school, but everything else he enjoyed had been like ripped out of his hands. But then in the second year of the pandemic, I saw him to start to like come into himself, and now he's like much more mature. He's like moving on to the next stage of his life because he wants to go to medical school. But now he's like settled down a little bit. And now that he's like gone back to like our little bit of normality, he's like still not partying because he's like, I just don't want to go back to that lifestyle. He's like, I feel like I've matured past it and I want to do something else. And I'm like, I think there's also people who like had that growth. So not just like fulfillment and like the joyous stuff, but like actually grew as a person and like changed as a person. I think that was really cool. It was hard to see him go through like the struggling part, but there was also like, you know, a good amount of growth out the other end, which I think was good. So there was people who I did see had like good-ish experiences over the pandemic and like took advantage of that time. Just before you reply, sorry, I'm just gonna read through some of these comments. I'm sorry, I keep cutting. I'm like
It's
talking this.
okay.
I'm rambling a lot.
That's okay. That's what this the purpose of these chats are.
Yeah. It seems one of the key. Where were we? I was terribly depressed back in high school, early college. It took a lot to find happiness. I was in the same place. End of high school, I was super depressed. I think first year university, I like started to get better. And then pandemic hit. My mental health has been up and down for a long period of my life, so I can definitely relate to that. For me, finding Markiplier, the positive energy certainly helped. A lot of people, when by themselves, have time to reflect, find out what they don't like about themselves. Yeah. Ooh, actually, that is a good thing. I got into Twitch over the kind of like you finding Markiplier. You find like people who like genuinely interest you and you bring you happiness on a daily, like just little things like I found like Twitch politics, and you know, most people think politics would not make you happy, but I really like watching people engage in conversation and debate, and that's what got me onto Twitch eventually. But I found people who like really inspired me to like think about things differently, and I think that was like something that happened over the pandemic that was really cool. Is I started to think about things so much more, but in like a productive way. Like I started to think about politics and my social politics, and like I'm a like left leaning person, but I think like the views that I held, I started to think about why I held them so much more and like why I see the world a certain way. And it made me change my viewpoints on things, and it made my other viewpoints stronger because I like had to think about these things that I believed in so much more, and I thought that was really cool. And then yeah, the people have to have time to reflect over the pandemic. I think that's also why a lot of people got depressed, because I think a lot of people realized how unhappy with themselves that they were, and I definitely knew people like that who like very much felt like they were in a place that they like without things to do constantly, like with the world shut down, they realized they had to like sit with themselves and they weren't happy with themselves or their own lives. And I think that was hard to come to terms for some people. And some people took that time to grow and change, and other people I think wallowed in that a lot. I think that's hard. Yeah, sorry, I'll throw it back to Sid now so we can have a, a little bit of time to talk.
Yeah. I think that this gave a lot of people time with themselves.
Yeah.
We kind of see that where people aren't returning to the same jobs that they used to hold. That's one of the effects, right? Is that they had to kind of ponder really deep existential problems, and that the hustle and bustle and the rat race of everyday life,
Mm-hmm.
even for like, never gave really like the common person time to consider that question.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that they keep, like, with wage earning and tying you to that minimum of 40-hour week and other responsibilities. Like, you don't have really much time to think beyond today.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time in a long time, you had a considerable amount of people, most of the world, at home thinking about what is beyond today. Is there
Yeah.
a beyond today? What is in store for it for me? And what did people discover
Mm-hmm.
when they were asking that question to themselves?
Yeah. I think that's also a really scary question when you like for so long have nothing else to think about but like what you're doing at this moment, like what do you have to do for work, and then what are you going to do tomorrow. It's like go to work, and it's like so many people, like when you live like that for so long and then suddenly all that comes to a halt and your whole life changes and now you have to like actually face it. It's like, man, that could probably be scary for a lot of people. I was lucky. I went through this like in my early high school days where I went through like a really big clash with myself. Actually, I think it was even end of middle school. I went through it really early. People like to say I'm an 80-year-old in a 20-year-old's body because I have the mind of an 80-year-old. I'm a very old person at heart. But I definitely had like that earlier on. But I definitely like I also saw people who went through that in the pandemic, and it's like, man, I feel really lucky because I'm like I was already struggling with my mental health. If I had to face that during the pandemic, I think I would have been in a much worse place. But because I had already had that clash with myself in years before, where I had to like really settle with who I was as a person, I think that like probably saved me a little bit of that hardship. Whereas like I know other people probably had to face that during the pandemic because it was the first time that they were forced to come to terms with themselves.
I mean, that's part of the whole reason why I'm even here in the first place is because of that question. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's I found myself I naturally ponder, but having found myself with considerably more time to put the question, I thought about it more deeply and more philosophically than I ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
For all of the time in the abyss, as I call it, I'd managed to walk away with a few new discoveries that were very integral to the direction that I'm taking my own personal growth. But like people don't often like have that opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think that it's made us more aware of things, like definitely aware of our sensitivities and our frustrations,
Yeah.
because we've already been on the way to a more progressively opened culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
we are open to the idea of progress, even if it has to be a little bit slower than most would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had time to look at those things and to see what fires people up, right? Like the whole, like there was the whole idea of being triggered before it happened,
Yeah.
before 2020 happened. Like that
Yeah.
was already, but but now you could really examine these, like the sensitivities that people had with the ways by which they wanted to be referred to, how they wanted to live in life, the actual value of their humanity. And they're like, well, um what is the value of my humanity if sitting around, like being in one place, I'm worth more than actually being active in the world. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at it from a financial perspective, like I make more money not working than I make working. Just question, you're already beginning to realize like, well, damn, when this ends, what am I really worth? Like,
Mm-hmm.
clearly, at this point in my life, I was worth more than that, and I don't want to go back to that. So, what can I do to be worth at least this much and not do anything to even amass this value?
Yeah, right? Oh my God. Just before I get to the comments here quickly, this did happen actually at a workplace. My aunt works, she's a hospital janitor, so she works at like cleaning the rooms after like people have been in them or cleaning like surgery rooms after. So she works there. Well, when we went on to stimulus, a lot of people chose to get laid off. Like her coworkers, people who did the same job as her, chose to get laid off because the stimulus was actually higher than what they were making being a nurse at the hospital, or not a nurse, sorry, a janitor staff at the hospital. So she was like cleaning these rooms so that they were prepared for next people, or like cleaning surgery rooms, or helping with all this type of stuff, and just like hospital cleaning. And they make less than what our stimulus was. So a lot of the people who worked with her just chose to get laid off. She was one of the only people who stayed in her job position because she was like really like she wanted to keep working and she like cared about like working there and she liked it. But I know like she was so upset because so many of her coworkers chose to get laid off, and like obviously that put a lot of workload on her because and like the other people that stayed because so many people did choose to get laid off. But like I also like we also like she was saying like she's like I also understand because like a lot of these people are like damn, like I could like make better money and be safer during a pandemic, like not working in the hospital and not having to do all this extra work and then get paid better. Like, damn, that's a good deal. And I like, it's like, damn, that's so sad that like somebody who's so essential felt like they like were better off taking like a stimulus check than like actually getting paid at work. It was crazy. Just quickly going through some of these comments. Politics is divisive, but very passionate arguments. I do watch Destiny, but I'm generally more YouTube centrist content. He's actually one of the people who inspired me to like start doing Twitch because I actually really like his content. I think he does really great debates, and I love watching him talk because I think he takes great like nuanced positions on things. He can really like look at things from both sides, and I really like. I could not find other people like that, or like there's not a ton of other people. I'm like center left, but I do watch like a lot of like centrist, like center left, center right, like people on YouTube. So we probably watch a lot of the same people. I would love to talk to you about that one day. When I do start streaming, it won't be politics. I'm more focused on having simple conversations. Yeah, I definitely want to do both. I want to do politics and debates, but I also like conversations like this that I have with Sin every Friday, which are just more conversational and really fun to have, like, and really interesting to have. Like, I think they're good for people to listen to because I think a lot of people like don't get to hear that kind of content. Too many umbrella terms that need to be broken. This is something I would love to talk to you about because I think this would be like a great conversation about this like umbrella terms, things that have been like spread way too wide. And if you're on that politics community, watch Destiny and those other politics streamers. I know exactly what you're talking about. The conflation of self worth with financial worth. Yeah, I think that's like super big during the pandemic. It's like a lot of people felt like, oh, the financial aspect was like so much better, just like living off like government's the like whatever the stimulus was than like actually working. And now all of a sudden like people felt shit about themselves because they're like, am I just working myself to death at a job that doesn't even like pay me my worth kind of thing? But it's like I think a lot of people realize just how like yeah, actually that's a really good point. I didn't even think I thought of that before, but like people tie that self-worth piece to like how much they're making, and it just kind of it does suck because like yeah, when people lost that and like people lost that self-worth in what they were doing, not because it was what they were doing and they were proud of what they were doing, but because it was like not financially motivating anymore. Then we have a first-time chatter, Alpha Kenny. If you are they, them, you have mental illness. If you call yourself other than a guy, okay, I completely disagree with this. But you are welcome to join the Discord or come on stream and talk to me about this. I will debate you on it. I think you're wrong.
It's so I saw that comment. I wanted to make sure that they were either someone that you knew or someone that you didn't.
Yeah,
And
I don't know
when
this
I see
person.
when I see comments like that, my immediate response isn't to take defensive position, but what I want to know is, do you truly know yourself?
Mm,
And what is it that you think you know about yourself that allows you to define yourself
mm-hmm.
in binary terms? Because I think that the more that we examine the question, the further away you're going to get from the comfort of that knowledge. And with a statement like facts not fiction, facts are dynamic 100%. We've had
Mm,
facts change so much over the course of our
you are
human
such a
history
philosophy nerd.
that the facts have become fiction in a sense, like they have become the thing that they're not. Now if you're talking about truth, that's a different
Mm,
thing. And then if we're trying to get to like the truth and not the fiction, well then what is the truth? Like we're asking questions to get at questions. We're going to go so far down the rabbit hole that at the end of it you might even think, well, like what is mental illness?
yeah.
And then we're going to start touching on things that if you start getting into a subject like what is mental illness, and that's part of like the part of the umbrella that to pardon the term, that we're trying to catch a lot of these things that are going through the human experience from the COVID fallout. Like what happens if you say a statement like, if you are they them, you have a mental illness, or if you call yourself other than a guy or a girl, you have a mental illness. Well, what if those things that are associated with mental illness you find are also invasive in other parts of your mindscape and in your life?
Mm-hmm.
So do you also have a mental illness? And would you be accepting of the fact if you met the definition of what is mentally ill, or would you reject it? Like there's a lot of questions and why. So it's not that when I see something like that I'm like, you are wrong and I'm going to fight you to the death on this. But
Yeah,
but
see,
I
you're so
think
much
that
nicer than I am.
but I see that when statements are made like that, where it's assuming that they are truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? The philosopher in me is like, let us unpack this and
Yeah.
let's see in that beautiful Socratic way, and even the way of Diogenes. So here's the thing, right? Because he's saying facts, not fiction. There's my favorite example from Diogenes where he puts the question to paraphrase, he puts the question to Plato, and he says, Plato, what is a man? And Plato says, and to paraphrase, a wingless biped.
Mm-hmm.
That is a man. So Diogenes, being Diogenes, brings him a plucked chicken, completely featherless, biped. I have found your man. Is that what a man is?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But the more we examine what we think we know, the more we come to realize that we actually didn't know what we thought. And
Hmm.
that's the beauty of these conversations.
Oh
That's
yeah.
why I like talking to Rex. That's why I don't mind people saying
Yeah.
things that they assume as truth or associate as fact to truth, because it gives us an opportunity to really explore.
Yeah.
And then if we can create like room for openness and acceptance, right, like along the way, even if it doesn't change a person's mind entirely, but they were open to the discussion, I
Hmm.
think that's a small victory for me.
Yeah, you're super super charitable. For me, I think you love to approach everything as a conversation. I will approach conversation in the sense of it is a conversation. Like with you, I love having conversations because things can be really open and fluid. When someone comes in with like something like that type of comment, I see it as very combative, and I will like debate people. I really like debate. I love to debate people. So when someone comes in as that combative, I assume that they're coming in some level of like hard stance, like this is true. And at that point, I'll be like, all right, I think you're wrong. So let's talk about it. Let's have a debate. Like I will debate you on this. And I like for people like that, I will definitely more take that response. But if you're like someone like Cloward Van, who I might not agree with every position, I will have like even if we don't agree with every position on each other, or like even with you, Sin, like sometimes though we tend to typically agree, I think we have pretty similar view outlooks on life. But like I love having conversations, even if like people differ in opinion. Like someone can come in with like a good faith like difference in opinion, and I will like address it with conversation. But when someone comes in with, like pretty hardcore stance, that I will like say like, hey, like I think you're wrong, but if you want to like debate me, if you want to like actually have your ideas challenged, like come on, like let's challenge each other, let's go. Like I will debate like hardcore. Let's just go through some of the questions here. Stimulus is good. Short term bad. Long term inflation is really bad right now. Hoping we avoid it. Yeah, that's definitely something to be worried about. Conversations are good. Good faith, bad faith. Unfortunately, with such a hard position, it's a person looking for facts, debate, or discussion. Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. That's kind of what I was saying. Is like sometimes people like that come in either with like a bad faith, like just trying to like dunk on you, whatever. Facts and truth are largely subjective, but it's all subjects are hyper nuanced. Yeah, no, I think that's what we're talking about. Is like what is truth? What is the truth? What is real truth? Because everything changes. Like our truth changes from year to year, from century to century. Like what is truth now wouldn't have been truth 100 years ago, or at least our truth, or like what like maybe there is a universal truth, maybe there isn't a universal truth. We have no idea. The most fun debates are passionate with understanding. The less fun are super combative, where, well, a debate never truly takes place, arguing definitions the whole time. Yeah. I'm sure, like you said earlier, if you watch Destiny, I'm sure you watch some of the other people in that type of community, so you've seen some of those debates. I think that's also why I want to get on here, is because, like, I wanted to start Twitch because I love that I like the really good parts of that community, like some of the really good debates that like happen in good faith, and people are like really engaging with each other and like actually arguing their points. But I see so many people who are hyper defensive and like, you're wrong, you're stupid, and like just want to dunk on other people. And I really don't like that. And I think there was like a really good opening for like more people who are like having good debates and good conversations to come in and like still talk about these things. And I wanted to be part of that. And I'm like, you know what? Like I want to see that change in the political sphere. And I'm like, if I can be that change in the political sphere, I think that'd be good. I think there needs to be a new model for debates. Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I also think it just needs to be people who are less like hyper partisan, hyper biased, hyper like just super. I think people have like wanted to create echo chambers now. Like there's definitely like some creators who I've seen like they only engage with people in their community and people who think like them, and anyone else outside that community is either like wrong or a fascist, and that's like your two options. And I don't necessarily like that. But I think some of the debates that happen, I still see like I don't know if you watch any of the debate panels like Hippy Dippy or like the some of those type of like debate panels. I think those still happen really in pretty good format, and I actually really like those. Parties send their sources in advance, talking points, decide on a bit advance, already agree on basic definitions. Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes arguing definitions can get a little bit in the way of like actual debate. Yes, and if you want to respond to any of that, sorry. Yeah, a lot of comments today. I like engaging with the comments, but it's good. I really
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Well, I was encouraging this, so I'm glad that it is that people are engaging, which is a good thing. It gives more information uh, to mull over. One of the things I am aware of course, and that they teach us very, very evidently. Well, I don't want to use that word, but it is taught that the Socratic figures, Socrates themselves, Diogenes, these figures may not be the actual historical individuals that lived if they lived, but they act as allegories to convey a greater message or a concept. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not so much whether or not these people actually did exist, but more so the importance of the message and what it relates to and teaches us about philosophical thought. Um, if these people were actually like existed as we read about them in all of these great works, that would be amazing. That would be a happy coincidence. But yes, I am aware that the historical individuals probably differed quite greatly from what we read about even in works of philosophy. Um, but but to focus the effort on the individual and rather than the thought, I think would take away from us. So that's where I'm going to try to bring us back to is to the whole idea behind this thought, and we have a TF in there, which probably is in response to me because I'm long-winded and I get off into the weeds. So it looks like you have some action going on, which I'll let you tend
Yeah,
to if you like.
thank you, Vikas, who is a friend. Thank you for the follow. And Kogu, the fuck? Okay, wait, Sterling. Hold on, does Sterling have two Twitch accounts? Okay, well, those are a couple friends. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I was gonna say, I feel like Kogu's Sterling, but I thought he had a different account. Anyway, oh, hi, Vikas. Okay, welcome, guys. Coming at the end of stream here, or at least the end of this big conversation. We got another 15 minutes here. Oh God, what were we on before everyone came in here crazy? Um, you guys are, you guys. Oh my goodness, my friends are insane. Anyway, we were talking about mental health. You need to examine me, please. Oh, we know, honey. Um, yeah, sorry. What? Hi, Jake. Oh, you guys. Um, Going back to what you were saying. What was Jesus Christ? You might want to have to repeat quickly.
So before everything kind of got very lively, we were talking about the importance of examining questions. So
Yes.
uh, and the philosophical inquiry associated with that,
Mm-hmm.
and then into philosophical examples, which of course got us into more examination, which brings us back to like the entire topic at hand is like we're here searching for information about like our human condition and this very unique era that we're living in and how it's affecting mental health and like I mean like part of this reaction that I see this dynamic chat reaction is this because like there's 2 years of pent up like I need to get this energy out so it's like I'm gonna go crazy in chat or is this like the natural like
I think you're
is
actually
this
just turning everyone in chat on. I'm gonna be honest. Just a little.
what wait hold on
Are you
what
not reading these?
oh my goodness I'm sorry. Am I? So we're getting out. This is going way off into the
This is
weeds.
a whole
Um,
okay.
wow.
Different kind of stream.
I.
Hey Sin, type in chat quickly, okay? He also has a Twitch channel. If you guys want to go listen to him, he streams almost daily. So, go check out his channel for more content.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe this.
Oh,
All of these. I will take the compliments. I will take
oh,
any compliment that I can get if it's well. I'll take any compliment. There it goes.
they're fun.
You can now this I'm all flustered now. It's complete this is how you derail a mind in philosophy is you start complimenting them
Yeah.
and then they can't think anymore and you've won the argument.
Oh, it's a good video of the character attacks undermining everything. Oh, oh, who is this by? I will save that for later. I will definitely watch this later. I'll keep it. Um, but I don't think I'm obviously not gonna watch on stream right now. But I will probably watch it. Maybe I'll discuss it next stream. Yeah, I think even with your stuff about questioning the like just the like the nature of like how we view things and how we approach life, kind of just to loop it back to our earlier topic. I think with the COVID stuff, a lot of it like what we started on is like questioning how we did things and why we did things, and especially with hindsight now, obviously we can't go back and change it, and it's not something that we probably could have done any other way, but there, looking back on it, maybe there was better ways to approach these things that maybe would have reduced harm in a lot of the other senses where we like mitigated harm from COVID, but we like exacerbated the harm of like drug use or suicide or overdoses. Small business owners, like people who lost their jobs and their business and their life's work because government shutdowns, or like just a lot of like, or people who like we were talking about, like people who missed out on like big life events like grad and the early years of university, and the people who got like pent up from university. And I was like definitely one of those people who like, especially in the first year of the pandemic, like suffered a lot, and like now just trying to like kind of take a view of like, was there better ways to approach this? Was there like a more ethical way we could have gone about addressing COVID as a whole that would have done less harm? I think is like a good question to ask. And I think some people get really like anxious about asking that question, because I think a lot of people worry that like, oh, like, what if more people had died and stuff like that? Or like, do you think it's not good that we did this? And it's like, no, I think it's good that we took COVID so seriously. And I think it was important that we like, made sure that people weren't dying from like obviously a deadly virus. However, when we talk about this, I think it's also important that we like address all the other issues that came from this too, especially now as we come out of the major pandemic spikes, and like as like COVID starts to wind down, and like if the pandemic starts to come to a close, we're going to have to now address all these other issues that came up during the pandemic, and what are the like outcomes of this going to be.
Yep, that's pretty much exactly it. And so, like you said, we started asking the question about why, like why these things happened. And
Mm-hmm.
now, like with this, I am looking at like, so what did happen as a result, right? Like what are the things that we can see with our own eyes, and that we can have firsthand accounts from our own experiences and those other people who are also here in chat and sharing those experiences, because we were all affected by this. Unless you were in a coma for the last what, like 3 years, essentially, as we're getting to like and even imagine then, like before your point, like you're like in this world of prosperity and growth, and you come back and it's like this like what every we're asking the question of like what happened and
Mm-hmm.
why, and did we take the right approach,
Yeah.
and just to be in like that whole mess of no information, like we all dealt with it, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all are in it. So what happened
Yeah.
and what is still occurring?
Thank you for the follow, Andrew Waney. I also want to address your comments here. It seems like you're using COVID as a hanger. Hey, what is that? World hunger? It has to be COVID. I don't think like we're talking about stuff like there is things that were exacerbated by COVID. I'm not trying to use it as a hanger of like every bad thing that ever came was like because of COVID. Like obviously, world hunger existed before COVID, but like there was definitely issues that became worse. And we talked about this quite a few times on stream now. With like where I am, we had drug overdoses like I think doubled or tripled during the pandemic, and more people were, in at least in my area, died of drug overdoses than they died of COVID. And like that's a really scary thing to think about. That like we may have saved a lot of people from COVID and COVID deaths, but we also then like let a whole group of people die that outweighed the number of COVID deaths we had. And like it was like compared to like our previous years, like these numbers were crazy high. And it's like now that's something that needs to be addressed. And like how do we go about fixing that now? Because these people are dead, and like we don't want this trend to continue because of like the fallouts from the pandemic. How did we save people? I mean, like just like protections we took against COVID, like just lockdowns and stuff like that, like anything that like would have like reduced transmission and like probably kept people a little bit safer. Mask mandates and lockdowns, anything like that that like kind of kept people from like and again, we're like that was the whole stream was about like addressing like what was the good things we did and what were the bad things we did and what had really negative outcomes. So like it was good that we probably had some level of lockdowns to keep people safe, but we also then isolated a lot of people that caused like a lot more mental health issues to arise. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, so we saved people from COVID, but now we have all these mental health issues that are causing people to like be pushed to the edge. It's like there was a trade-off there. So like now we have to address that trade-off, and how do we fix this problem that we now caused? It's the defining moment of a generation. The positive, negative impact of COVID will be measured through 2030. Yeah, I think so. I think this is something that's probably going to have long-term fallouts that we're probably going to follow for the next like 5 to 10 years. Like maybe not 10 years, but like at least like the next 5 years, we'll probably see the outcomes of this and like how it affects society and people in society.
Yeah. So and Andre, asked the question, what did we do special? And that's a very fair question because we see kind of the results on whole is that everybody that reacted very similarly had similar results, and nothing fantastic happened outside of like what New Zealand having some of the lowest rates, and there are a lot of reasons that put them as like an outlier on the histogram, is like that dot that's out there for reasons that don't necessarily mean that they were special, but maybe conditions that made it more conducive for them to have such a low rate and to confine it. But like, I'm interested in like, hey, was there a place that actually like was special and for but held everything else in common with all the other places that were just suffering? And
Mm-hmm.
what anomalous thing happened there that led to, their containment or their low infection rate? Like there's might be a place out there that was relatively unaffected, and it's like that wasn't like necessarily like remote or an island or otherwise like geographically isolated from other places, which of course, if you bring a novel disease to a place like that and boom, like everybody's wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, like maybe there are, maybe no one, maybe we didn't even do, maybe we just followed the plan, and the plan was conducive to some results, but
Mm-hmm.
like we don't know what that thing is. Probably won't know for a while, but like at least we're figuring out like the effect of what it is now,
Mm-hmm.
um even if it takes time. And that's why I enjoy these conversations, and really just kind of putting a whole bunch of questions out there.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. I kind of want to respond to these comments because they're interesting. Problem with COVID and any other disease is that it's the dampest generation I've seen. Keep in mind, you and me, Rex, were like 40%. The other 60% is not following these procedures. I mean, how about this? Let's talk cause and action. I want to know what you mean by dampest. I also want to say, like, I might be part of the 40%. I followed most of the rules, but like, there was times everyone broke the rules. If you say that you went through I don't know where you're from. At least where I am, some of the restrictions were super intense. There was no way that you could follow those and stay in like a good mental health place. Our restrictions were super heavy where I am, and it wasn't something that we could like necessarily follow at all times. Causes of COVID can go under China. What action do we take against China, Egypt? I'm in California right now. Hold on, but like at that point, it doesn't matter, right? Like even if like let's say in theory like that China did something like maliciously like sent out a virus and that they like put it on the world. Sure, we could take action against China, but that doesn't stop the virus at that point, right? We still have to protect the rest of the population. So when we talk about like what we did, we're talking about what we did in terms of like actually protecting people. Like, and again, I don't know like where it came from. No one can be sure of like what actually happened. It's all speculation, it's all theorization, but no one has a clear cut answer. So there's no point in persecuting like a whole country right now when we don't have a clear cut answer of what actually happened. Because it could have been a lab leak, it could have been an intentional thing, could have been an unintentional thing, could have been what the first theory was like it was just like a bad virus that came from an animal somewhere. We have no idea, and like I think the idea that like we should focus on where it came from rather than how to protect people once it's out there is like probably the not a great approach to take, in my opinion. I just don't think that's like necessarily the thing. It's something we should address, but it's not something that we should focus on, especially once the pandemic started. We all know as a fact, all of the protection procedures came a month late. Yeah, but again, it was one of those things where no one kind of knew for the first like month or two what was going on, and I think it was a hard thing to implement. Um, I mean, trust me, I'm an anarchist. I don't like government, but I can also recognize that, like, in this case, like, government probably didn't know exactly what action to take because no government was prepared for a pandemic. It wasn't something that we were set up for. And then Cloud Van, I said, I'll want the data later on the different vaccines by each company, which companies were ethical, which cut corners. Yeah, I could already probably make some guesses. I was super into medical, like the big pharmaceutical companies and like what they were doing before. I always was intrigued by that. Like I was in a chemistry degree, obviously, so I was really interested in like different companies and what they how they proceeded with like ethical creation of drugs. I know Pfizer, if you look into Pfizer's history, you will not be happy. So I think that'll be interesting if like we see what the data releases later on these companies are. And hopefully if, you know, the vaccines might be helping us. However, if these companies did these by unethical means, these are things that we actually need to account for and hold these companies accountable. And then Andrew is saying, let's see. I mean, it's impossible to talk about COVID as a globe. Every country is doing its own mind. Wait, I took 2 shots of Pfizer. Wait, what? Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm not saying that they did like something unethical with the vaccine. I'm saying like their company in the way that they make drugs is unethical. Like they've done like child experimentation in other countries and never held accountable for like those things that they've done. Sorry, I don't want to like make you scared. It wasn't anything wrong with like their actual, well, they've had stuff in the past, but like don't freak out because like millions of people in the world have taken this. I'm sure if there was mass issues with it, we would have seen it by now. Like, I'm not trying to freak you out. I'm sorry. Don't do that. Do you think Republicans are the cause of COVID? No, I think that's a much more nuanced conversation. I think people want to blame outside groups. I think that's a really bad way to go about addressing those issues. Don't try to stick the blame on people. And that's the same thing I was trying to say to Andrew with the China stuff. It's like trying to stick blame on different groups of people is a really bad way to address any issue because all you do is sit around pointing fingers rather than actually addressing the issue. I think the German courts are digging into Pfizer right now, but I'm not sure on that. It might be happening. Pfizer's done a lot of bullshit in the past. They have not been held accountable for any of it. If you guys want to look at, maybe I'll try to post in the Discord the link. There's a old article I had that like kind of laid out a lot of their old issues. I can post it in the Discord if I can find it. Sargon has a video on Pfizer's history. Yeah. I don't like Sargon, but I wouldn't trust his videos personally. So we shouldn't blame the Nazis for the Holocaust. We should probably blame... No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, when we're in an active issue, it's probably not good to sit around and point fingers. We can, like, retrospectively look back and say, like, what these people did was wrong. But, like, we're sitting around right now and to say, like, oh, Republicans are causing it, or, like, it's, like, these group of people that are doing it, is probably not a conducive way to fix this issue, especially when it's not, like, we know it's not just Republicans who are doing this. Like, this is a much more, like, nuanced issue than to just say, oh, Republicans are causing the pandemic to continue. It's not a good way to approach this conversation. I don't think it's, like, it's the way that you should. Again, my Discord is open. If you want to have, like, longer chats about this, my Discord is open. You can come in there and chat with me. I'll take you on. We can either have a chat off stream or a chat on stream. I will do it all. So, like, are you a communist? No. Not practically. I like it in theory, but I just don't think it's a practical thing. I'm a bit of an anarchist at heart, but like, I don't know. I'm politically a little bit weird. I like aspects of communism, but I don't like in theory how we would get there, or I don't think it's actually ever theoretically possible for humans to be fully communist because I think we're all too selfish. There's a lot of issues with it, so yeah.
I'm a very self-interested individual, and I will work for the sake of my community, but of my own self-interest. And there usually has to be some system of reward in place to help me be a more conducive individual to that end. And that's just me because I know myself well enough. But I will have to bow out here
Oh yeah, I'm
because we're
sorry.
at it's okay. You had a lot of things going on here, and it looks like you have some great topics to dive into. So I'm going to be taking my leave of you and our wonderful conversation and all of the fantastic activity we had from all of your chatters. Thank you so much for contributing to our discussion. And I'll leave you to them and all of their devices.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay on for another probably half an hour to an hour here. So anyone in the chat who wants to continue talking about this, I just want to shout out my partner here, Sin Fatalis. He also has a Twitch channel. He streams almost every day. He does like Dead by Daylight and gaming stuff. He just typed in the comments, so if you guys want to go give him a follow, he is awesome. He's also on my channel every Friday. We do a sit down conversation and debate, or conversation debate style stuff like the conversation you've heard here tonight. We do this every Friday, 9 p.m. PST, and it's always about 3 hours. So if you want to come and join either of our communities for that, it happens every Friday. But yeah, go follow him. He is awesome. He does fun gaming content. I really like watching his videos. Yeah, so, but he's gonna bow out here for the night, and I will stay on for anyone who wants to continue chatting.
Righty. Good night. Thank you, Rex, for hosting me,
Good night,
and have a
Tim.
wonderful night.
You too. Okay, and now it's just us. Let's see. I mean, cut out Republicans. A lot of minorities are unvaccinated minorities because of their bad history with medical industry. Yeah, I think I have had this conversation on stream. For minorities, a lot of it is like this like broader distrust in like institutions and systems that are in power, and so a lot of them like fear that like with stuff that's happened in the past or the way that the governments have treated them. I know here a lot of the Native Americans don't want to get vaccinated because they know that governments have been really bad to them in the past. So like if government comes in and wants to like put medical stuff on you, I think a lot of people are hesitant because of their relationship to government being a minority. I'm a Nazi fascist. I think heaven is a place without Republicans. Okay, that's something we could talk about if you, again, everyone has their version of heaven. I'm not going to fight you on what your version of heaven should be. I learned my politics from Hassan Piker. I hate Native. Okay. I feel like you're a little bit of a troll, but if you're not, I would join the Discord. We can have a conversation. How are you? If you learn your politics from Hassan, how would you hate Native American? Actually, I don't like Hassan either, though, so I don't know. That's a whole other conversation. Cloud Ban. I had a friend in, I think, Idaho. A lot of Democrats there are apparently not vaccinated either. Topics are nuanced state by state. Yeah, 100%. That's why I don't like this idea of like sitting here and like playing the blame game and saying like, oh, this group is like keeping the pandemic or going, or like this group is doing it. Like, okay, yeah, I had a feeling you were trolling after I read a few comments, and I was like, why am I still responding to these? Yeah, I think that's like the problem with like, and like when we sit here playing the blame game, and it comes down to like so many different issues. Are like, oh well, it's because of this person or this group that we can't get what we want, or like we can't end the pandemic because of this group. Even when it comes to like general like social topics, like when it comes to like government policy and stuff, like people are like, oh, Biden doesn't care about students, and that's why we're not getting like student debt relief. And it's like I don't think anyone realizes how hard like some of these things are to address, and then it's not like a straightforward answer. Like people want to like look to like the pandemic and be like, oh well, it's the Republicans who won't get vaccinated, and that's why the pandemic keeps going. And I'm like, none of you are scientists and understand how viruses work. I never finished my degree in science, and I know better than to say like, oh, it's because of like this one group of people that the pandemic keeps going. Viruses are a very complex thing. Even if everyone gets vaccinated, there's a chance that this won't end because if the if the virus continues to mutate in other places, we have a chance that like this thing is still gonna like out mutate the vaccine, right? Like this isn't like 100% like we're gonna get rid of it like once everyone's vaccinated. It's like this is don't don't let yourself get trapped into like just sitting around playing the blame game with people. It's like it's not just bad for discourse. It's bad for yourself because you start to put yourself in an echo chamber. I know Ungun here was just trolling a little bit, but like yeah, I just wanted to like kind of double down on that point a little bit. I mean, 50% of the time you're not listening to Hassan. He's too busy streaming videos without any commentary. Yeah, okay. I've cultivated a bunch of Hassan haters. Damn, I didn't even have to say. I personally don't like his politics. I think he's a little politically illiterate. I'm not gonna say more than that. I'm not trying to start anything my first month on Twitch, so we're just gonna chill out. But you guys talk shit all you want. Go nuts. I mean, I like listening to debates with Hassan because I find that he doesn't debate anymore. That's the thing is like Hassan refuses to engage. Oh god, I'm with you, girl. Yeah. Oh my god, I'm finally like, see, this is what I came onto Twitch for. I haven't like found any people in the politics community yet, and this is what I was trying to find is like people who are like into like political Twitch because that's kind of the group that I want to go into, which is why I do these Friday like talks because I think a lot of people who are in that. Oh, thank you for the follow. I really wanted to get into like that political Twitch sphere because I think so many people like debate in really bad faith or like just some of the debates are just so it's so hard to listen to people talk about issues because there's no nuance left anymore on the right or the left. And so many people just want to like be like, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, and they're all fascist. And I'm like, fuck, this is not how we like engage in like good discourse. This is not how we make people change their minds. Yeah, people are too emotionally invested. And I think it makes it really hard for me to like sit and watch these because I really love watching like debates and like and these type of contacts or conversations, but it's like it becomes really, really hard when people are just all uppity on their position and everyone else has to be wrong or like a bad person. Like if they're that's the other thing is like people are like, oh, they're wrong, but you're not only wrong, you're a bad person when you're wrong. And I really don't like that narrative that's like really like hot on Twitch right now. Which is why I wanted to start my Twitch channel, because I thought, I'm like, you know what, I want to come in here and have like real conversations with people and let people express their ideas to me and talk to people and like kind of cultivate like a moderate like group of people, like people who like can like see both sides of things, people who can have good conversations about things. That's what I want to do on here, and just talk to people. I really like talking to people about different issues. Like I love engaging with you guys in the chat like this. Thank you. So, yeah, I also have a Discord if if you want to join that. Like I super want to like talk to you guys on there and like have conversations, whether it be on stream or off stream. If you want to ask me questions about my personal stuff, like personal takes and stuff, things I haven't discussed on stream yet, you can totally do that. Sweet, what, yeah, also gave me a follow. Thank you for that. Sorry, let's go through the comments here. I mean, let's see. I'm largely from YouTube. He's rubbed so many users wrong for streaming their content without crediting them or transforming the content. Yeah, yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that about Hassan. Did he also get banned for the Hell's Kitchen stuff? Didn't a bunch of people get banned because they were like streaming like Hell's Kitchen, just like the whole show, up there with Pokimane streaming all of the Avatar because copyright? Yeah, is why I linked the video of character saturation and why it doesn't help anything. Yeah, yeah, a lot of these streamers are now just taking advantage, I think, of like other content. I understand like Hassan like used to do some like react stuff and like would react to like different political takes, but now it just feels like he watches things and laughs at them. And it's like that whole idea of like just if they don't agree with you, they're stupid, they're wrong, they're a bad person, and you can just laugh and degrade them, and you don't actually have to engage with any of the points that they're making. So like that's why I really like the you know, the debate panels. I don't know if either of you watched like the Hippy Dippy pod table on that Dylan Burns does. I love his debate panel because I think it's really well moderated. He does a really good job of bringing topics and bringing people who will like discuss in a good way. And it's unlikely that he'll like. There is times where people will just like go on there and like fight each other. But I find that's like one of the panels that I really like watching because like people on there will have really good conversations, and at least I feel like sometimes they'll get there. Let's see. How do you feel about critical race theory in relation to 9/11? That's a really broad question. How do I feel? I mean, I'm on board with critical race theory in universities. I think critical race theory is like just like we already have like critical theory in like criminology and sociology. Like this is already something that exists, and now it's just like a race perspective. And then in relation to 9/11, are you talking about like how we view events, or how are you talking about how we view groups of people? It's a really broad question. If you want to narrow it down at all, Jay Goldie. Watch the Minecon debates. What are the Minecon debates? One of the YouTubers is JXC, who made a full parody of Hassan. Hassan reacted to Jay's video, left to use the bathroom while it ran, so he reacted to that, went on the bathroom break, and at the same time, it was, oh god. Yeah, great React content. Just letting other people's, like the Boston bombing, you know what I mean? Are you asking me how we like view these events in terms of like a race perspective and how like global relations like it's okay. Okay, I wasn't sure if he was trolling. I'm trying to be like charitable to like people coming to my chat and asking questions. I like engaging with people, but if like that's why I was kind of scared that you're just trying to like induce me into like like race stuff. Like if you actually are not being a troll and you have a real question, you can ask that, but like I'm not going to engage with like if you're just kind of trolling. Yeah. Okay. Great. Nice. You're There you go. That one's getting deleted, dude. I won't ban people off the bat, but if you keep doing it, I will ban you. But I try not to, you know what? People are stupid. People are going to say stupid things. You can say a stupid thing. But if you keep saying stupid things, you will get banned. Look, I'm a small streamer, alright? I'm not going to go on a ban rage. That's the right attitude for Twitch. Yeah. It's hard. I've only been streaming for like a bit over a month now, so I'm still kind of new to all this. I'm just trying to like cultivate as much of a community as I can, like people who want to have conversations. That's why I'm like I really appreciate people who like engage in my chat while I'm doing this stuff, because like as much as me and Sin are having a conversation, me and Sin also really like seeing other people come into the chat and talk and engage with us and like ask questions or give their own opinions, because that was like the whole point. Like when me and him talked about doing this, we're like, yeah, it'd be really fun to like, because I'm like, I want to do Twitch so that I can talk to people and like have people who also think like think about these issues and talk about social issues and want to talk about these issues, because my friends all just get annoyed with me because I constantly talk about politics. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys like engaging in the conversations with me here. For schools, I generally am more in favor of love of community and love of country. It's a spectrum. There is too far, but I generally am on that side. Dang, she thinks I'm funny. More bold jokes or no? You can try it. You'll get banned. So, my lord. Should I ban him? Yeah, I guess for a day. That sucks. She's pretty hot, man. Good luck. All right. Thank you. I'm not heavily researched on CRT, but a lot of what I see is really terrible stories of teachers getting students to hate themselves, their families. I think these are really narrowed stories. My thing is like CRT is a really like it was made as a university level course, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is like people talk about implementing it in like elementary schools. It's probably good to talk about race relations and like just general community acceptance as like in an elementary setting. Like you can talk to like people and like talk to kids about being like, hey, like, like this is why we shouldn't judge people and this is why we should accept people. And then as you get into high school, you can talk more about like, things going on in the world and like systemic racism and like these broader issues. And then when you get into university, you get into the high level like CRT stuff. Like CRT can be like taught at every level, but it has to be really it has to be approached in a way that like is actually like conducive to people's learning and isn't just making kids feel bad about themselves. And I've heard these stories, and I don't think they're very common, but the few stories where it happens get blown up like crazy, and it makes the whole thing look like makes CRT seem like this like crazy like radical like perspective. It's not. We already have critical like what's called critical theory under like criminology and like sociology, and what these things are is like talking about like different issues in terms of like a critical perspective of like society and like saying like what are like the economic conditions, what are the social conditions. And now like with critical race theory, it means just focusing on the race aspect of that, and just looking through a race lens at society and why people end up in different situations. Transgenderism is innately contradictory of the idea of limiting gender roles. I agree with this to an extent. I think it's really hard when we're still, like, I think for people who are trans, I think in a society where we didn't have such strict gender roles, we might not have the amount of trans people that we do, just because, like, I know it might be a hot take, but there might be a better place in society to have, like, two branches of transgenderism and, like, people who actually feel like the other sex and people who want to go through sex reassignment and actually be the other, like, with the other group of people, and people who are transgender who have, like, more of a social transition, or like maybe even fully transition, but like maybe under a different society, a society that didn't have so many intense gender roles, maybe those people wouldn't fully transition. They would just like live a little bit more freely, whereas the people who like have like a sex misalignment would still probably transition in that society. I think there's like probably like some spectrum of transgender people who like actually feel like the other sex versus people who just feel like the other gender because we're in a society that's like heavily gendered. That's all fine lessons. Stories like your parents didn't help Martin Luther thing really rubbed me wrong. Virginia shifted hard right over this. Yeah, I think teaching kids like that is probably super wrong. Teachers who teach like that, I think probably shouldn't be teachers because you don't know how to teach kids. That's all that tells me is when people act like that, is like you don't actually know how to teach kids. You're preaching at your students. And that's never a good way to go about like learning and teaching. Let's see, I'm less focused on how something is in theory and more how it's taught and executed in classrooms. Yeah, no, for sure. That's kind of what I was saying is like if that teacher is teaching things that are like super like critical towards the kids or making the kids feel bad, it's like we should be teaching kids about history and things that have happened and how. Zaddy, stop it. Ooh, thank you for the follow. Can I have your snap? You're not getting my snap. Sorry. Personally, I don't understand feeling like you should have have a dong. I get gender roles in society, but either eliminate those or implement transgenderism Both are impossible. Okay, so here's the thing. The problem is we don't know exactly how transness works, right? So like there might be some level of like there's just a social drive to like transition because you feel like more aligned with like the other gender in society, but there also might be some like level of brain misalignment. So like we talk about people who like how we develop in the womb. So there might be some level of like, you know, maybe you're subjected to like some level of hormones in the womb, which is also how we like think it happens for gay people. Like we think gay people are natural, but we're like, how does someone turn out gay? And a lot of the theories come back to like hormonal exposure in the womb. It might be similar with trans people, where like you're exposed to like certain levels of hormones, or your brain might develop different than your body. So your brain might stop developing in the female stage, because I think when you're a fetus, you start developing as a female. Everyone like starts as a female, and then like you either like at some point during your development you turn into male or you stay female. And it might be one of those things where like your brain and body develop in different ways. So like it might be one of those things where we like actually don't know that there's like some biological drive to this, and like until we know any of these facts for sure, I don't think it's worth like saying like, oh, people shouldn't do this, or like this is a wrong thing, because we actually don't know how these things work. Why am I too ugly? Yeah, probably. Gender dysphoria believer. Yeah, I think like probably like gender dysphoria is like somewhat real. I think especially with like heavily enforced gender roles in a society, if you really don't feel like connected to like your gender, like there's probably some level of you feel like you're in the wrong position in society, even if you're not in the wrong body, or you might feel like you're in the totally wrong body. And like I said, like there might be some biological drive to that of like you might have developed the wrong way, you might have been exposed to certain hormones, you might have like, even it might just be socially impacted. It might be something that like you feel like you are with the wrong class of people. And then like any of these could be the right answer. We don't know what the right answer. We don't know enough about transgenderism right now. Transgenderism, I'm so tired. I generally avoid discussion, fine with people who are trans on an individual level, but I discourage it as much as possible. I think it causes too many societal problems that can't be reconciled no matter what we do. Um, I can understand that take. I think this is something I'd want to talk to you more about in like a voice call setting. I'm going to bed. See ya. Might be back another time. Oh, thank you for stopping in. Thank you for contributing. Good night, man. I'm probably going to jump off in the next like 20 minutes here too, because it's pretty late for me. But thank you for coming. I try to stream at least 3 times a week. I attempt to keep it up, just depending on how my papers and finals and all that is going at school. But thank you for joining in. Um, yeah. I think the thing is, like, when it comes to trans problems, I think more of it has to do with, like, if we can, like, not stigmatize things so much in society, I think we'd be okay. I don't... It's really hard to talk about trans issues in a short time span. I think I would have to, like, dedicate a stream to, like, talking about this. And, like, having people ask questions. It spreads to trans race, trans age, turf, lesbian, trans conflict, sports, other contradictions. So with trans race and trans age, the thing is, like, we have some, like, scientific backing for transgenderism. People who are trans, like, we have scientific, like, we can kind of, like, acknowledge phenomenon. We can understand somewhat why it happens. Like, we've seen, like, brain development, like, people whose brain are in people, trans people whose, like, brains are more similar to, like, the gender that they identify as. So, like, there might be some actual, like, basis there, like, that we can see. And that we see it's enough of a problem in society to to actually acknowledge it. Whereas like with trans age and trans race, there's not really any like underlying fact of the matter there. There's like nothing that exists in their brain that is like giving them dysphoria. I don't think anyone like we've ever heard of someone having like race dysphoria. Like you might want to be another race, but I don't think there's any like scientific underlying fact there that would cause someone to like want to change their race. Same thing with like age. I think like these things probably come back to like some type of like people who do this. I don't know what the cause is, but it doesn't seem like we have any scientific basis for it or like why it would exist. Turf, lesbian, trans conflicts. Yeah, the stuff with like between the LGBT community, I'm bisexual and I've seen these conflicts, and I think sometimes it's either like one side pushing too hard or the other. I don't think if like you're trans, you should expect anyone to have to date you just because because not everyone's going to be comfortable with it, and you probably don't want to date someone who's not comfortable with it. I think we should probably just like stick to like, you know what, if someone doesn't want to, that's fine. Don't call them transphobic for it. It's probably just like a thing they're uncomfortable with and they haven't fully come to terms with. It comes back to that whole thing we were talking about, like discourse online of like people want to say you're a bad person if like you don't agree. And it's like sometimes people just need a longer time coming to terms with like different societal issues or different like new social notions that they haven't been exposed to before. And it's probably something that we shouldn't like jump down people's throats for. And I think a lot of these like issues can probably, with a little bit of discussion, can be alleviated. I think TERFs are a little bit annoying sometimes, if nothing else, because they care way too much about things that don't affect them really. We can argue this, but even without science backing, the doors are open. Societal consensus determines a lot of what's true and not always science enforced. That's true, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Um, because I don't think everything has to come down to science. I think society has a lot of ideas of how it should work, and if most of society, or at least a large part of society, agrees that this is some way that we should live, it's probably okay, even if it's not backed by science. Because I don't think everything in our lives is going to be backed by science, and I don't think everything in our lives needs to be backed by science. I think we should try to like live by some level of like code. I think science should reinforce a lot of the decisions we make, like for policy and stuff like that. But I think when it comes to like societal consensus, I don't think like necessarily going off of like science is like the only way that we can make decisions. If that makes sense. I hope I'm not rambling too much. I'm like, it's getting kind of late and I'm like, I start to ramble when I'm tired. But yeah, I mean, if you have anything else to say, or if anyone else who's here in the chat right now has anything else that they want to talk about, I do have a Discord open. There is a link down below for it. You can join that and send me questions there. Or even if there's things you want me to cover in future streams and talk about in streams, or if there's videos you want to send me to talk about in stream, when it comes to like politics stuff going on, if you want my opinion on different things in politics, you can always send me those ideas on the Discord. Or if you just want to talk to me about different things going on, you can also shoot me a message on the Discord and I will always respond. Um, so let's see. Anyways, fun chatting. I generally avoid political discussion online. It's not always politics. I do some gaming. I do some other stuff. I try to have fun with my community. But yeah, if you want to interact, go and join the Discord. Thank everyone for hanging out and enjoying the night. It was a good long discussion, but I am definitely getting tired now, and I am going on a hike tomorrow, so I should not be up too late. But thanks for hanging out. I got a Twitter down below. I don't really use it yet. I'll try to start using it more now. But yeah, thank you for hanging out, guys.